You're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up.
Welcome, everybody. This is Team Rabbit Hole Edition 294 with Ashley Ayres, if I pronounce it correctly.
How are you?
Living to Serve, Philosopher, Entrepreneur, Psychonaut, Aquarius. Coming in hot from the West Coast. Join the team as we get to know Ashley, a peaceful revolutionary, raising kids, making moves, and changing the consciousness on the planet. Can fungi be the hub of a culture shift we so desperately need? Let's find out as we walk the razor's edge of the rabbit hole. Welcome and well met, Ashley.
Hey, thank you for having me.
For sure, dude. We've been friends on Facebook for a hot minute, and we've never really talked much, and I'm so stoked to get you on here. But before we jump into it, and by the way, I hope you caught some of those illusions. One of the things, like living, like the title of the episode, Living to Serve, you say that on your Facebook, but also Step and Razor is a great song, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to have to put that in somewhere. So
You caught all the cultural nuances.
Jupiter and Aquarius life. So anyway, today's episode, we do this way on the episode podcast at this point. Basically, 294 reduces down to 6. 2 plus 4 plus 9 is 15, and then is 1 plus 5 is 6. Is the Lover's card, Gemini card. I am the gateway to divine love. This is about seeking connection with others, and we are finally connecting. Blending opposite ideas into one. Making a choice. Accepting yourself as you are, and giving and receiving freely. Raphael, I'm curious what you're going to pull.
Sorry, guys, my cards are falling all over the place. So here we go. We have the Four of Pentacles. This is, I believe, the Lord of Earthly Power. We have resources, ownership, assets, cleaving to that which one has, gift, legacy, inheritance, pleasure, gaiety, enjoyment. We have astrological correspondences, Sun, and, of course, Capricorn. So, Jim, or Ashley, you're up. Anything that sings for you?
I mean, as somebody who walks kind of between both worlds, I shouldn't be surprised that you pulled such heavy and accurate cards. I think those are all topics that are central and thematic to my life currently, both as a father and in kind of the area that I operate in.
I totally I jinxed myself with the saying the internet's awesome because it keeps cutting out and then speeding up. So I know I think you guys heard the Lover's card, but I'm not even sure if you heard that. Raphael, did you pull a card?
Oh yeah, we're good. Well, all good, Jim. You can continue. Or
no, but what was your card? I didn't catch it.
Oh, we have the Four of Pentacles.
Yeah.
Lord of Earthly Power, resource card. The resource card.
Perfect. And I heard you guys summing it up, so I was like, all right.
Okay, now it seems like your audio is cutting out, Jim. That's the thing, actually. So best case, maybe just rejoin, Jim, because we can only see you gesticulating but not talking. And he probably doesn't even realize. All right.
He does now.
So we'll do the following. I'll ask him.
I'm here. I love how we're going to have technical difficulties. Uranus is opposite Uranus right now, and you are a double Aquarius. He's North Node Aquarius. I'm a Jupiter and Aquarius. We're bringing in a lot of high electric Mercury energy. I mean, Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So it's like, I can't blame a Mercury retro, all this stuff. In any event, Ashley, I'm not sure specifically when I turned on to you. I feel like you maybe made a post that was cool, or you were part of some psychedelic group. Oh my gosh.
We've lost him.
Let me try. This is going to be
Jim, you simply have to rejoin the stream.
Let me try something.
All right, we'll do the following. Okay, Ashley. So since we're live, we're just gonna continue. So let me know maybe in whatever way you became aware of Jim or how you got into contact, and then we'll get into your biopic.
So yeah, I became aware of Jim through sort of the Veered, what I call the Veered. I sort of had a
Weird, like WEIRD, or with
like
a Y,
with a V in front of it, the Veered, and it's kind of like a word that it means like you walking between worlds. You live in a lot of my teachers are view-based teachers, and so a lot of what I have to share and what I've learned is view-based, which means I think ontologically you need to separate, or not separate, but you need to decide. You need to have a choice and say, this is the worldview that I walk in. And I met Jim around the time that I was engaging with community in that veered worldview that sort of transcends materialism and standard Cartesian philosophy. And so Jim and I started connecting, and we were pinging off of each other, honestly, off of Kuan Yin. And Kuan Yin was a deity that he was working with and I know that I was at that time when I was working heavily with Vajrakelia, Tibetan lineages, and so sort of going through that sort of psychoses, awakening state that happens to a lot of us. And while that was happening, Jim and I were like pinging off of each other with similar cultural practices, I think. Because a lot of at that time, Facebook was a creative writing and sort of an open source journal for me. So
I just to ask, so you're talking about 10 years ago.
Yes. So I started writing. I just started writing on Facebook because I could never keep a personal journal. The idea of keeping an open journal and leading with vulnerability, which was a major lesson for me at that time when we met.
That's what's up. I'm glad you filled in all the gaps smooth, like fucking a baby's butt. Good job. All these technical difficulties are crazy. In any event, yes, we definitely met. I forgot the Kuan Yin bit. I think there was times when I was dosing on acid like once a week, where I was way more exploring that kind of stuff, like you're saying, and Buddhism and things. I'm in a weird place now. We don't have to talk about that. It's more like agnostic and kind of like what you're saying, practical. Where I'm just like, look, maps are cool, but where's the truth, and what does that even mean, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just vibed off you right away, and I knew that you were on a search for meaning, and it would look different, but your authentic search was necessary for my kind of pastiche of conspiracy. That meme with like from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, I guess, with strings everywhere and all this stuff. I felt like I was assembling ideas on an ontological map, and you were one of the people, one of many people on Facebook that helped create this gestalt thing that I called my worldview at one point. So I'm glad that you kind of felt the same way, I guess, because I wouldn't have thought about the Kuan Yin thing. Are you still working with that energy?
Yeah, my background is a martial artist. I started with like Bruce Lee and just taking what is useful and discarding what is not useful. So that practice has had to stand the test of, current cultural zeitgeist, which calls it appropriation. You have to somehow prove your blood quantum to do something, which is that's a racist concept. So having these discussions today versus having them 10 years ago when it was more of an authentic awakening is very different. But yeah, she's one of my root practices. Although I've learned to put her in her place, in her corner where she belongs, because I learned that if you work Kuan Yin too hard, too much, you will bring lots of your karma. Which if your job is to get the fuck out of here protocol that Buddhism has to clear your karma and leave, then that's very helpful. That's a very useful image to work with. But if you're actually just trying to get through your life a little bit, there's a place for Kuan Yin. But if she becomes central, it can be sometimes you're taking on
high
karma.
voltage.
Yeah, it's a lot of karma, but it's a lot of karma. It's compassion. It's compassion, right? So, but you can't have compassion if there hasn't been some karma. you know.
Yeah.
So I learned later other magical practices for kind of like putting a pause on that karma so that you can, like, you know, do the dishes and get the kids to school.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
seems like there's many phases, wheels within wheels, as Ezekiel would say.
Yeah,
There's
I would say you were another source of information that I was pinging off of. And then I was like, you were a constellation in the network that was kind of developing. And at that time, there was a lot of differences in the culture between, you know, people back then were pagans or Wiccans or New Age or this. And now we have this whole new, like, thing that
yeah,
defies
I mean,
name.
Just briefly,
Go
can I ask what are people now?
I don't know. In fact, we have gone beyond all of the definitions of anything that I had ever imagined having for things, and we're making up new words. And it's a very exciting time. I'm really excited about it because I see that the squares and the Saturn people they're squeezing, and they're using all their technology and all their scare and their fear tactics. But it's like squeezing sand. You know, the harder you squeeze, the more it just fucking pours out.
A rock doesn't bleed.
And so, like, they're losing control everywhere. As the means for control are getting larger,
tighter.
they're just
Yeah.
totally losing control of everything. And so it's a great time. Like, if you ever learn that song, Learn to Swim, or Enema by
Tool.
Tool, or whatever,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the Tool song where they want to wash LA away. Like, it's happening in a way.
Oh, it's
You know?
happening. It's not
Yeah.
it's not a 2012 like John Cusack movie thing. I think people were more anticipatory of that with the McKenna kind of shtick. And I honestly do think we had, I won't get into like what I think it is because who the fuck knows, but I feel like there was kind of a quantum, I'm not going to use all this hot topic jargon words. It feels like timelines, how would I put it? The Mayan culture seems to have had a pulse on certain elements of reality, and they, for whatever reason, gave, you know, that Baktun ending at 2012. And if you look at before 2012, I'm not saying it was normal. I mean, there was like kind of a progressive linear, exponential kind of growth thing, like evolution was happening. But in terms of the McKenna time wave zero kind of mapping, it feels like around then, things just started getting more surreal and hyper divergent in a sense. And like you're saying, it's even McKenna was like, you know, basically psychedelics will lubricate your consciousness for how to operate in such a reality that becomes so bifurcated that no one knows what truth is. No one, you know, everyone's got their own little islands of culture. And then how does that work in a globalized society, which is the new tribe? This gets all over the place. Anyway, you mentioned LA in that Tool song. Let's just start there. You were born in SoCal, or grew up there, it seems. So what was that about? Are you the only kid? Like, what's your family culture? Were they kind of Buddhist more, or Catholic, or, you know, tell me kind of the petri dish that you grew up in that scar on the face of Mother Earth. It's
funny you say that. Petri dish. My older brother used to tell me they found me in a petri dish. So I've got two brothers, an older brother who's about 9 years older, and a younger brother who's about 4 years younger. My dad's from Indiana. He's like Welsh and German, like from Indiana. His family goes back a long time.
He's a Hoosier.
Yeah, and Kentucky and the Alamo and all that kind of stuff. Born in 1943. He served as a paratrooper in the 82nd. Later, he served in 7th Special Forces. He was over the Bay of Pigs during that time in Cuba, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He escorted James Meredith to school during the Civil Rights Movement, during the Old Miss. So I grew up in, my father was a very old school person raised by his grandfather, who lived through the Depression. So like, it's just old school and polite and as civil as you can imagine. And
like a combo of compassionate but like practical and like doing the work, not just being like, oh, we hope people are free. It's like, I'll go fight for freedom, or I'll escape.
Yeah, there was definitely an ethic. Like the story that came down to me about my great grandfather was a drunk next door named Van Cleef, and he came over one day very upset with something my father had done, and he was drunk, and he, you know, beat the kids, beat the wife, beat the fence, beat anybody around him. And he came over, and my grandfather was a diminutive Welshman, was a small banker. And he threatened to beat him and beat the children. And my grandfather was dressed in a 3-piece suit and had a small Derringer in his pocket and said, you know, Mr. Van Cleef, if you don't get off my porch, I will shoot you like the dog that you are. And he was living in Indiana because he had fought in a duel and won. And he had come south. So when he said that, he meant that. And I guess I was always raised to that violence is an essential component of living in a predatory universe, but you have a choice whether to be a sheepdog or a wolf. And
Right.
I was raised with sort of like my dad's sort of Western chauvinism and read Plato and, you know, all that kind of stuff. My mom is from Texas. She's born here in America, first generation Mexican, but it's hard to say Mexican because my family on my mother's side has existed in that particular town of Conatillo, Texas, longer than the United States has existed.
Right. I don't know about this. Like, yeah, the whole map of the Mexican Civil War.
So, whether that's indigenous, whether that's Mexican, whether it's whatever, my family's been running a store over there for 300 years, right? So, you know, they were the first people to encounter the Southern Puebla tribe, the conquistadors and stuff. So my mom's from, you know, El Paso, Texas. My dad's from Indiana, and they met in Los Angeles and stayed and, you know, had children. We moved all over, lived on sailboats, houses, apartments, you know.
Hold on. How was living on a sailboat? Start there.
I lived on a sailboat for a year. My dad was always an entrepreneur, and so he wanted to live on a boat. So he imported a bunch of them from China and then sold them, and then we lived on one for a year. And we would sail
weird
down the coast.
Yeah, did you enjoy it?
I was amazing. I was how old was I? I was 9, so I would like leap off the bow of the boat onto the thing and wrap up the, you know, the cleat with the rope and winch the sail. I mean, I was a pirate. I was doing all kinds of big things. I was, you know, terrorizing seagulls, and I was king of Ventura Harbor as far as I was concerned.
That's what's up. What a unique perspective of Ventura Harbor. Most people aren't doing that at 9. So you were doing like the whole Flipper Jacques Cousteau thing for a year. That's pretty cool. So I mean, it seems like obviously kind of like when I say military brat, that seems like, you know, very pigeonholed, but it seems that, you know, you were kind of hopping around with an entrepreneurial, militaristic stoic, basically. And
like this weird like fake male culture thing that's all over social media. That's this like distorted fun house mirror of like reading the classics and contemplating them is kind of what I grew up with at that time.
Like the Jordan Peterson vibe, basically.
Yeah, like Jordan Peterson got some nice things to say, clean your room. It just seems really remedial, and I guess it's really essential on some level. It's like an essential Saturn component of our life. But this whole like culture thing that's going on seems a bit, you know, silly.
Raphael, what do you want to say?
So I think it's kind of interesting. I'm wondering if, you know, maybe Peterson and all of those, which, you know, anyone from a decent following upwards, I'm somewhat suspicious of, or then, you know, you listen to many of their talks, you see, of course, everyone is human. Let's just start there. They have their boxed-in belief system. They have their maybe oversimplified methods. They have their privilege in different ways. I'm not talking about white male privilege, obviously. So that's one interesting aspect. The other thing just came to my mind, if you've seen Andrew Tate, and this is one of these like, you know, hot topic people. And I wasn't, you know, so aware of it, but some people get pushed into your shorts and I'm like, what is this guy doing? Supposedly he's a Muslim now and so on. And I was like, very strange, very strange. And then I looked deeper into it, and then I saw, because on the one hand, it seemed like, oh, finally, you know, there is some counterbalance to the overblown, insane feminism in the worst sense, aside from, you know, it's good if one knows where feminism even comes from, but that's another aspect. So they put this other front there, but then they make it so extreme. If you listen to this guy for longer, I didn't know that. You have girls that are like crying, oh my God, my boyfriend got brainwashed and so on. And then you listen to this guy and he's saying things like, yeah, well, of course, my girlfriend can have an OnlyFans. And yeah, of course, maybe I'll give her the card to buy some shoes, but I get the money. And I'm like, what is this?
I was well, that way.
It's so ridiculous. Yeah.
You know, I think at the beginning, I think this is why I'm so into view-based discussions, because if we decide that everything is animate or everything is not animate, right? And if it's not saying one's better than the other, it's just that if we agree that all of us have to make a choice and we're all in this life together and we have to decide how we will walk this path, you have to decide whether the path you're walking is a living path and it's a path with heart, or it's not. And if you just make this simple decision, then you find that a lot of these discussions that happen on what I call the material or terrestrial level, that seem like you can take two things and put them next to each other, and now they seem par. this is not the case. Like one's a cup of coffee is completely different. But by putting them on the screen in front of you together, now it's a choice. This is artificial. It's meaningless. It's what I call polarization nation. And I took that from another person that I'll credit another time. But once I saw that, I realized that like for every terrestrial flower, there's a celestial seed. And so because my cosmos operates in an animistic point of view, when I hear this, like Andrew Tate is balancing extreme feminism or TERFs or doing this, or, I went to a college called Antioch. We invented the sexual offense prevention policy that now runs the entire country in the 90s. Our alma mater was do something for humanity. So like very, very extreme hyper liberal school. I'm well schooled in all of that. And there's nothing wrong with any of the positive things like enthusiastic consent that have come out of those type of awarenesses. However, thinking that you achieve balance by throwing different crazy amounts of weight on either side of a seesaw doesn't produce balance. It produces chaos.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that is, of course, also the goal why those people are put into your feed, and not the nice neighborhood granny or someone who maybe has something even more interesting to share about it. But I just want to find out how ridiculous it is, because if you just see it from outside, you're like, oh, maybe says something interesting, maybe not. Obviously a plant, because it's everywhere. And then you listen close and like, oh my God, it's so nefarious, actually, how these psyops, each have their target groups, and how crazily, amazingly well it works, both in the moment and also through time, through the seesaw, how to, just have groups fight each other, when actually all they would have to do is actually understand each other and not have, these crazy, insane puppets basically espouse the viewpoints.
That's tricky because it gets to the cause of necessity. Like, I mean, what you're talking about is very much the psychedelic viewpoint, kind of an objective, higher truth, where it's like, oh my gosh, the yin and the yang, it's one symbol kind of thing, as opposed to picking a side. But it seems there's an evolutionary causal necessity to these things, and that, I mean, depending on one's presuppositions, like in a Jungian sense, I think we're individuating collectively, so certain shadow elements and certain light elements, quote unquote, have to kind of come to the fore to be processed in a particular way. So I'm not ever going to be like, oh my gosh, World War II had to happen. And there's a whole lot of things behind that. It's not so simple as that. But it seems like the conditions of the Tao are such that things occur because the conditions of the Tao are as such. And it's just like, it's this alchemical kind of soup that we're in. And once you kind of get the joke, you don't identify with the ingredients as heartily. You're not like potatoes over carrots or, this, that, and the other. It reminds me a little of Steven Spielberg's Hook, if you ever saw that film, where they're basically picking between Rufio and Peter Panning, who's, the returned Peter Pan, and they're just like, all these Lost Boys are running from one side to the other. It's just like emotionally driven propaganda stuff, and it's cute and it's funny, but it's also condemning and like sad, and I guess deserving of our awareness and compassion, because it's like, man, we're just literally still like, we have animal instincts and herd instincts, and these are being manipulated on us a lot of the time without our even awareness of it. So things like patriotism or gender identity or economic status and stuff like that, like you're saying, in a sense, if we were to presuppose it's this living organism that's kind of flowering and breathing and exploring kind of potential within itself, then we don't become so ground in the chess game. I mean, it's just you see it like Bobby Fischer.
I think it's the opposite of brainwashing. People use the term brainwashing a lot without fully having done the reading on the developmental psychology that is involved in brainwashing somebody. But it's much easier to do with children. But it's more like brain structuring. And when you use these sort of like 19th century German techniques to order society, and then you build up all these things you're talking about, people live inside these prisons, these panopticons. Franz Kafka, as a reference, came up with this idea of panopticon. If anybody doesn't know it, it's like you're in a tower. There's windows all around looking, and the people in the cells are in a circle around it. And the panopticon can see everybody at all times in their cells. There's zero privacy. This is a concept that is now a literal truth. This is the panopticon.
Yeah, the Black Mirror
now
the all-seeing eye.
And that's why I've never done a podcast, and I decided to stop being a Luddite and just join the discussion. But there were many times I felt like joining the discussion before, but I had to censor myself for a decade because I realized a lot of what I had to say wasn't worth sharing. It was angry, or it was whatever it was. It was definitely my process, but it
Correct.
maybe it need to be shared. You know what I mean? Maybe that wasn't worth sharing, right?
It's funny because you do have Mars, I think, in Virgo. I'm looking really quick. Mars in Virgo, Jupiter in Virgo, Saturn in Virgo. Your Mars and Jupiter are conjunct. And this is all in what, 11th house. So in a sense, you're like, I'm doing my cleanup and I would share it, but I don't need to spill my milk. I mean, it makes total sense. You're very couth. Let's put it that way. You're a peaceful revolutionary. So you're going through your own storm, but you're like, I don't have to go to January 6th about it. Like I did that internally, or
Well,
what?
I felt, well, I didn't. It's not that I didn't have the urge. I always had the urge to share and to be the center of the spotlight. But as soon as you start dissolving that shit with psychedelics, as soon as you start doing the actual work, and you realize that by feeding into those ego needs, that hustle culture, that self-promotion, aggrandizement, putting yourself in front of the medicine. I thought about wearing a mask, not because I don't want anybody to know I grow mushrooms, but just because, like, or putting a mushroom in front of my face or something. Because anything I'm speaking from is from service, from the awareness that I had that eradicating self-importance was the first step in being able to be of true help and service to other people. And and it doesn't mean that you don't wake up and brush your teeth and take care of yourself first. So
You're still a
put
self.
on your own oxygen mask and help other people. Doesn't mean that at all. But that was like the first thing is you have to own your mistakes, and you have to stop lying to yourself. That's the number one thing people do, is they just lie to themselves about everything. And they even use lying as a way of brain structuring and creating these false realities that they live in. So it's almost impossible to talk to most people. And the second thing is you have to own it. You have to wear it. Literally, wear your mistakes, wear the worst parts about you out there until you're comfortable with everyone having accepted that. It doesn't have an impact on you. Then after that, you can kind of let go of that baggage and, get about doing the work of being very ordinary and being okay with that. That's the hard part, is how do we do our life's purpose? How do we become meaningful? How do we become impactful? How do we become empowered and yet not become attached to the pursuit of these things?
You're saying beautiful stuff, dude. I'm listening. And you're like,
Yeah,
don't talk to the mask. Oh my God.
That was really my struggle. And so because of that, I never wanted to share or speak out, because that itself seemed like a betrayal of the process.
Correct. It's like photography. You don't want to expose the film too soon, or else it doesn't come out quite right. Or it's like, I hear what you're saying. And you're a sun and moon Aquarius, right? And with all that Virgo energy, you're going to naturally have this ability to see kind of the schematic of reality. And then, in all honesty, it's like it's a service oriented job. I mean, you're like, I'm a revolutionary for the cause, but the cause has to be one of love, essentially.
Yes.
Of service. So anyway, we can go off on every tangent. I don't want to hang up too much on your past, but you were at 9 years old. You're on a fucking yacht or whatever the fuck, sailboat. And so you said your school and college and stuff. Kind of flash forward. Are there any highlights we need to worry about? Like, what were your skills or hobbies? Did you play sports? You were saying martial arts. When did that kick in?
Yeah. So my father trained me in self-defense and martial arts at a very young age. I grew up in Los Angeles. They raised me in a kind of way where, like, I was riding in aqueducts. I'm not to say my parents didn't take care of me. Well fed, well loved, well taken care of, well looked after child. However, I was given a lot of freedom, like meme 1980s meme freedom. Like, I was drinking beers with the construction worker across the way. I almost fell off the roof from taking dip. I was like on the stack of penthouses in the first grade. That did trauma. I like the list of things. I was almost kidnapped from a park in Venice by a naked guy who was doing stuff I didn't understand because I was too little, and he chased me for an hour and I hid. Many crazy things happened to me, just like many crazy things happened to everyone. I started smoking weed at 14. I bought my first sack of weed in People's Park, which doesn't exist anymore in Berkeley. And at the same time as I was reading books about People's Park and what went on in Berkeley in the 60s. It was crazy hanging out with bums and drinking whiskey with them. I've always been an outsider. I've always been a lover of history, anthropology. I spent most of my free time going to the woods and learning how to rub sticks together, make fire by friction, shit like that.
You're a mad scientist, but you're a hermit. So the martial arts was kind of something your dad inculcated into you. It doesn't surprise me, obviously, but when did it start turning into more Was it always like Bruce Lee philosophy of it in terms of like the esoteric level?
Yeah, my dad is a big time writer and philosopher, and James Ayres, and he's written a few books. One of them called The Tao of Survival, and
Nice.
it's a very philosophy oriented look at and view based look at survival. It's kind of like how to clock the predator walk by while the butterflies also flutter by, and not be attached to either the predator or the butterfly, but be able to observe both of them. You know, being in that kind of white space is the survival space.
Hmm.
That's where you have to be in that sort of white space, that zero space, to survive dangerous encounters. I imagine that's where cliff divers go. You know, but yeah, I
The
spent a
white
lot of
space.
time. Yeah, it's just kind of like it's kind of, I don't know, that space is just like when you let your eyes go soft and you can see the whole room, but you're not focusing on anything.
Yeah, like a
Yeah,
dilated kind of place. I got
yeah.
you.
So
Um,
my dad integrated that type of teaching since I was as early as I can remember. And so martial arts, outdoors, and philosophy.
Survival.
Yeah, as soon as he found out I smoked weed when I was 14, he
Not
took me out
happy,
of
probably.
school and locked me in my room with a book called A Path with Heart. This is a modern Buddhist book. and
Nice.
and like Jane Goodall's book on chimpanzees, and I had to write some other terrible essay. So like
What was his mission with that? You stupid ape! You damn dirty ape! What are you doing? Like, what's going on?
my dad's real old school. He like big on fighting for everyone's civil rights to do what they want to do. Smoking dope was not one of those things for him. You know,
Mhm.
he was
Right.
importing
Like social
well,
causes more
Indiana
than
Jones. You know, he was importing like pottery from Mexico when everyone was smuggling dope. You
right.
know, and his story. I have to say, I can't talk about my story without talking about how impactful my father was for me. He served in the military and was in special forces down in South America, and he was so disillusioned with it. It said, "De oppressa libre," which means liberate the oppressed, which is what they put on the special forces little green beret.
Mhm.
And when he realized he was the shock troops, that he was there to oppress the liberated.
It's a
He
very
had,
mind fuck.
yeah. After years of brainwashing and going out there and doing things and being in places that maybe we can't talk about, we weren't. He just did a 180 and left and went down to Mexico. And when he went down there, he got dosed by these hippies. They put a bunch of mushrooms in his frijoles, because they were like, "Well, you need to chill out." And he was like, no. And he's like, "I tripped out. I saw a big demon in the room, like all kinds of things, And he's like, no. And I'm like, they probably did you a solid.
Yeah, you saw how the other
Not
half
good
lives.
to dose. It's bad manners to dose people.
Completely.
But
Yeah, my brother was dosed by a homeless, like acid at some point. They were like drinking beer one night, and this homeless girl, I guess, crashed on the couch, and they woke up at like 8 in the morning for work, and they're like, "I'm tripping," or whatever. And it's like, I mean, on the one hand, tricksters, yay, but on the other hand, it's like, y'all, like,
you're
people
only
have
supposed
responsibilities.
to thumbprint people who do bad things.
I don't know about thumbprinting. That's insane stuff. That's serious level. I mean, that's like, yeah, yes, I know what you're talking about. Basically, if people don't know, LSD is a crystal, and basically Grateful Dead kind of rainbow family mafias discipline, I guess, people by overdosing them essentially to the point of who knows where. It's kind of a twisted way of justice, but it is what it is. The pirate's justice. So that's fascinating about your dad. I had no clue about that, so thank you for sharing that much. So your martial arts were an always thing. And you started getting into psychedelic. I mean, there's a big difference. I do classify cannabis as a mild psychedelic in my mind. If you never smoke and then you smoke, I mean, you're gonna be feeling. Like, yeah. If you're a stoner, it's a little different.
Chris Benet will argue that point of 420 Liber. He's a psychedelic author. Great books. I recommend him highly, as he talks about cannabis as a psychedelic sacrament. Of course, I didn't experience eating copious amounts of pure hashish at 14. I was smoking some terrible
Reefer. Yeah. Whatever.
Not psychedelic.
A lot of seeds. It might have given you like a weird Anthony Kiedis buzz or whatever, but not like Tikal.
It wasn't even a microdose. Nope.
Yeah. So when did you start turning on more to like classical quote entheogens like mushrooms, possibly those kinds of things? Because it's funny. People tend to go cannabis is a gateway drug, and in a sense, I see that because what happens is I think it loosens perceptual filters. It creates it's a total reset for normies, if you want to put it that way. So if that is something that is a proclivity for somebody, they will lean more into that direction, probably. So that's why, in a sense, yes, it is kind of a gateway drug. It's like if you go to a cool concert, you might buy albums after that or something like that. In any event, what's kind of your relationship with the psychonautic front on that level?
Well, I didn't really experiment with mushrooms that I can until I was. So when I turned 18, I saved up all my money, went to Colorado, did an outdoor survival apprenticeship for 6 months, lived out there, did a bunch of weird stuff, came back to Oregon or Washington at the time. And I was living on the border of Washington, Canada, making fishing nets. And I just decided I wanted to go to college. So I took some community college classes and I went to Evergreen State University. And I had no idea that Paul fucking Stamets was the professor there at that time. I didn't know what mushrooms were. I was a moron. And I spent
you was where you were.
I spent my entire time there eating mushrooms, running around in the forest, not going to class, organizing, parties and, running from the FBI who were breaking into dorm rooms looking for stashes of mushrooms and other ecstasy and things like that. Okay. And just, basically having an awesome college experience that I totally failed out of because I did not
take it seriously.
Homework. At all.
Well, you had the hedonistic recreational side down pat. You had
my first mushroom experiences, I ate a bunch of them. And I was
define a bunch, like 5 grams kind of thing, or
like a handful of them, at least 5 grams.
You say this so casually. That's
a lot. Well, we didn't know back then. People were putting them on pizza. You stuff them in a peanut butter sandwich, whatever. So I thought that was disgusting. So I knew enough to fast. So I fasted, and then I just ate them. And I didn't really expect anything. As I was walking back to my dorm, you're through the or if you don't know where Evergreen State University is, it's located in Olympia, Washington Peninsula, which is a temperate rainforest, which is where there's thousands of fungi just everywhere. Yeah. And I just slump into a tree and proceed to have my first ego death experience. Then I just proceed to die. And I say, Ash, my boy, you have fucked up. You have eaten the wrong mushroom, and this is what happens. The cougar is going to come and eat the heart out.
All the books from your dad.
I was like, and now I know why cougars are there and jaguars. I got it. I was like, oh my God. And I finally got back to my room. I turned off all the lights. I laid in the dark, and I didn't mess with mushrooms again for a while.
That's funny. I'm not going to say it's exactly the same, but it's like, it seems like deeply, how do I say, traumatizing psychedelic experiences cause people to put down the phone in an Alan Watts sense very readily. In high school, I had a friend, basically he had never eaten mushrooms. And at that point, I wasn't like a cavalier psychonaut, but I was like kind of, here, eats to my friends, whatever. And we ate these, basically he's sitting in the car and it's raining and we're just sitting there like kind of coming up, listening to the Talking Heads or whatever we're doing. And he's like, what's going to happen? I'm like, oh, you're gonna have ego loss or death or whatever. And that's really what happens. But that kind of put him in a headspace, and he proceeded to have I don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but basically we went to his house on drugs or something happened where it was like his parents were like, "Come home, we know you're fucked up," and it was just a shit show. So when things like that happen, it seems like it's a powerful lesson, becoming one with the tree on campus or whatever. Side note, I have never been to Olympia. There's a sync book. They're called the sync book. They're like Jungian synchronistic kind of media metaphysicians, kind of like Marshall McLuhan and stuff like that. They had a meetup in Olympia, and in downtown Olympia, it's designed off of a Kabbalistic tree. I don't know if you knew that, but it's like there's a waterfront, and then all the way through the park and the gazebos and all these buildings. I'll send you a link at some point to what they were doing because it's like
Olympia, you're saying that Olympia is set up like a Kabbalistic tree
of life. Yes, parts of it.
I don't even need. That's what I mean about the veered. Shit is just veered. The synchronicity. It's like you just get to a point where you don't clock them or write them down anymore. You just like,
TMI.
But of course it was. Like, yeah.
Why
wouldn't it be?
All right. So Paul Stamets, was he one of your professors and you just ducked out?
No, looking back, I realized that I was on campus at the same time, and he was not one of my professors. With the irony in that is that like I would have murdered to be one of his students. Now, who I am now, who I was then could care less. You know what I mean? Yeah. Who I am now realizes what a fool I was. But yeah,
Don't
so
think of it that way. So heavy, Virgo. You're just sitting there beating yourself up, saying never
oh,
again.
definitely. But you know, then I
you were in
went
the
to
noosphere though. Like you were in the
later
same
on. I went to Antioch, which was the college I spent the most time at, made most of my friends. And there I started just, you know, selling weed and mushrooms to people and eating them and smoking it and creating a culture and a lifestyle that I enjoyed. That was, I saw revolutionary because it was a felony. You know, like we were going to get back then in 2000, it was really against the rules. It was a
It
big
was
no.
not okay. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't sell cocaine or heroin or anything like that. Like I sold weed, and I made money at it. You know, I made quite a bit, and took my little brother to Europe. We had a good time. You know,
What's up?
yeah, you know, and I've always thought that, you know, when the DARE officer came in and said there's a war on drugs, I knew immediately that he was my enemy. And, you know, I've been egging cop cars ever fucking since. And I don't like cops. I don't care if they're your uncle or your cousin. Pick another line of work in general. You're a hall monitor. Okay.
That is what's happening. Yeah.
And that's just my personal sentiment. I haven't had good experiences with them. I haven't had really bad experiences with them. I use my manners, but I think that most of the people that gravitate towards that job are terrible people. And I think that
Well,
if you're
generalization, but I hear what you're saying. They're usually power.
Yeah, I make broad generalizations, but like if you want to lock somebody up, if you're willing to enforce a law, if you're willing to harm somebody potentially, every time you engage in physical conflict, there's a chance for death, even accidental, even unintentional.
Correct.
So if you're willing to breach the social contract of physicality, you might risk somebody's life. It better be worth it. You know, it better be worth it. And when I see all these people's lives ruined for access to what is everybody's animistic indigenous birthright, it just drives me up the wall.
It's tricky. I mean, it's Agent Smiths or stormtroopers, because what you were saying about your awakening process and your dad's awakening process, really, when you got dosed. I don't know if you're into the Star Wars kind of franchise, but The Force Awakens has a character who's like a stormtrooper, Finnegan, I think. Flynn, maybe, I forget his name. But either way, he's like, oh my God, I'm having a moral crisis and I can't do this, blah, 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 even though he's a clone stormtrooper. But what you're kind of saying, and I don't disagree, and this is where it gets tricky with the compassion stuff. It's like there's going to be a kind of a, how would I put it, a bell curve of awareness, I guess. So at the one end, you have like monkeys who are going to beat and rape, and you know, just the most basic people possible. They're barely like spirited at all. It happens to be that, I guess, level of the vibes or whatever. Most people are like aware of good and evil or whatever, you know how to operate. And then there's people who don't really need, you know, I guess the sages and whoever's quote woke tends to have broken through on the farther side. Who, you know, they're anarchistic and they have a code for themselves. They're enforcing their own rules. It's not so much that they have to be prescribed and enforced from outside. I guess that's the idea of law enforcement, where it's like it's good that I get, you know, there's probably places and times where it's like everybody's raping everybody. We have to have somebody govern this, or so, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to give it the benefit of the doubt a little. But
you know,
as a
fan and student of anthropology and history, and I've been looking at civilization extending. You know, we now know that humans in our current form have lived for 150 to 200,000 years. People have lived in Australia for 60,000 years. You're telling me that the beginning of civilization happened 11,000 years ago because you learned how to make bread in Iran? I don't fucking think so.
Correct.
Okay, we have been on this earth. We have been doing this. People feel like Romeo and Juliet. People feel like you and me. People have been living and dying for 100,000 years or more. If you look at how many ice ages have occurred and how far our genetic population has dwindled and born again and dwindled and born again, you know, and to argue about the things that people argue about,
contrivances of culture,
yeah, the contrivances of culture is an excellent word, and there's some things that are useful, and what we see is that, you know, biologically, like 10% of the 10, maybe 15% of the population is wired for violence.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. There's bad monkeys.
Yeah. And thank God for science and biology and neurobiology and developmental biology and all this stuff, because evolutionary biology, because now we're learning so much more that helps us make sense of our wisdom traditions and our narratives. It's not mutually exclusive. These things work together. They explain why, you know, matrilineal lines matter. You know, why does a patrilineal line matter? You know, why were these cultural practices of breeding set up this way? Why they were marriages arranged? Because if you didn't fucking know any better, I mean, good Googa Mooga, you just can't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, somebody needs to know who's related. And so you have a lot of these, like, you know, now we have spreadsheets or apps or whatever, like we can figure this out. So
The culture's
you know,
updated a little, but the
yeah,
songs.
we need a cultural update. You know, and when you're talking about chaos and order and seeing everything is together, I see everything as a happening. It's just a constant happening that we're born into, and
It's
your
very
contribution.
Buddhist of you.
Your contribution is whatever your contribution is to the happening.
Mhm.
And
we're held accountable for that with the karma, I guess, is the idea.
yeah, if that applies, if that's even true, you know, it's
Correct.
just one I've adopted because out of everything that I understand, it seems to be the most useful to me. Right? I can't prove it even to myself, let alone to anyone else. But I still need an operating system to turn the computer on.
1000%. That's the bottom line.
I still have to know how to behave. I still have to have a way to get through my life every day and make sense of it. So problem is most people start
Overly
awakening.
identify with those programs, typically.
Yeah, a lot of people have, are just running on a program, first of all.
Yeah.
You know, and what I think a lot of people don't understand about mushrooms is how associated they are with death, the death of your ego, the death of your beliefs, the death of structures, the dissolution of things, the dissembling of things. They would just take you apart. And that's not, you know, you need an ego. You need a shape form to carry you through time. You know, it's like Alan Watts said, if you can't remember yesterday, you can't imagine the future. Yeah. And hey, that sounds like enlightenment. It also sounds like a lower form of life, like a bee. But you're not a bee. A bee is a bee. You know, we are much more complex than bees. So obviously we should be a little more complex in our being. You know what I mean? So I think that's the dilemma for a lot of us is I don't think we should be taking apart our, as you put it, animalistic impulses for those things. Like we came out of cannibalism. We've lived through cannibalism. That's how we're here. You know, we got pointy teeth.
Part of how some people survive. They weren't all breatharians or whatever. I get that. No. Well, this is where it's tricky. Some people are like, "Oh my gosh, Atlantis." This is where kind of the end of the Pisces age, or however you want to couch this. It's like there's a lot of, and it's the double-edged sword of information. It's like the more information's out there, the more possible distortion there is. So it's like we're growing in information constantly, it seems, as the anthropological record would suggest. Because when we say that people will look like us 100,000 years ago, physiologically, but the software was so different that their experience of reality was probably fundamentally different than us. I mean, clearly they're not like singing Jim Henson songs in their mind or whatever. It's like, I'd like to think that they had, it was like, what's your opinion? Was it like, almost platonic ideal forms of cultural programs where it's like, it's pure kind of more pure stuff? Or, I imagine music has existed as long as we could tap things and make guttural sounds. Right.
I mean, music, the whole universe is ordered around music and mathematical vibrations. That is obviously the language of creation, God, whatever it is.
Whatever. Yeah.
You want to call it, whatever you want to call it, and, for the sake of this dialogue, I live in an animistic universe. So everything is alive. Everything has spirit. There's the spirit of a chair that exists as an idea, and then you can make it again somewhere else. And that's the spirit manifesting, right? Somebody carves a chair. That's literally spirit manifesting. So that's kind of my
that asshole Dare Cop, spirit manifesting.
Exactly.
It's hard to remember.
When you see that one person that's in the crosswalk, that's always getting in your way when you're trying to go somewhere, I posit that that's actually one spirit that's just everywhere, obfuscating people that are in too much of a hurry and are irritated. Many different avatars, but that spirit is manifesting. That's like that lady who's just walking extra slow, and you're like, motherfucker, get out of the way. What you
Come on, Saturn. Yeah. Or
chill out.
Going on.
Chill out, man.
So okay, let's like kind of unpack that a little. And if we're not touching on anything you want to, I mean, I'd love to hear what your major was and what because you were. It sounds like you were doing crazy shit. Then all of a sudden you're like, I guess I'm going to educate myself and get official, even though you didn't do it right away.
Well,
like you did the journey.
Originally, I was into martial arts and punching. Then I got into esoteric forms of punching, like punching your acupuncture points, right? And then I got into learning the secret herbs and stuff on how to make my iron palm, right? But then that led to learning about healing. And my dad was very sick with a chronic illness, so I wanted to become an acupuncturist or an herbalist. But I was in college studying business, and I had this dual parallel life thing going of like doing business, making money, having to live, and having this other radical or personal experience of life. And that's honestly how I got into, and then, I was poor at college. I swept the gym. I had a federal work
janitor. No.
Yeah, I didn't have, no. But what I mean is I had a federal work study job. I was there on a scholarship. I wasn't there. No one paid for me. I was on a full ride. I took a Greyhound, and so I sold weed and did things so I could have money to do things so I could go on co-ops or jobs, things like that. So I had a very like mercantile sense about how I got through my life, and I was very attached to that. When college ended abruptly for me when they cut my aid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there like a reason? Were they just like, you're a stoner?
No, I had good grades. They were just like, yeah, we're cutting your full ride scholarship.
Bureaucrats doing their thing.
Yeah, and I was like, the school eventually went out of business, to be fair. So they were having fiscal issues, and it had been there since the 1700s. So like, I'm not mad at them. It wasn't like a vendetta with me. It just, I got cut. I wasn't, I didn't make the team. So that was it. So I went back to Los Angeles. I got a job selling cars.
Wait, so you didn't get a degree?
No.
Okay, that's what's up. I'm halfway through a degree. I get it. It's not the same at all, but it's like, yeah.
No, I mean, I've gone to like 4 different community colleges. I've gone to Evergreen. I've gone to Antioch. I've studied many different things. I started going.
You don't need the degree for the record. You're just as well educated as fucking Stannis, I feel.
I never finished high school. I got into so many fights. See, my name's Ashley, and that was really not popular back then.
Or something on or whatever.
Yeah, it was just not the way. It's very awkward, and and I learned to recognize bigotry and rudeness and aggressiveness right away. Some people are just going to make a comment and walk by, no big deal. But when you've got like 5 skinheads in front of you and they've been
predatory
all day, they're about to beat you up. Yeah. So I just started fighting back and winning, and eventually asked me to go to continuation school. So I went to college and high school. So I just kind of been going to college and not accomplishing much for a while because I'm not good at school. I'm not good at doing school. I'm good at reading and learning. I'm just not good at doing the whole like showing up and like filling out the forms.
The bureaucratic red tape of the education system is a hassle. But the information is gold. I love it.
Yeah.
It's fun because it sounds like you come to a place where you're like, information's helpful, but I'm kind of not over information, but I think you have more a higher perspective on things at this point. So you got kicked out and then you sold cars in LA?
Yeah, that's where I met my wife.
Nice.
I was just selling cars and she came in for service. I tried to sell her car, the whole thing. We went out to lunch and we ended up hanging out.
Did you actually think she was like, was it just macking on her and you're like, yeah, what's your number? Or did you think there was something more? I mean, was your intuition kind of going, oh?
I'm always big on connecting with people and talking. And so we had an instant connection and we were talking, and somebody was like, oh, I think she's just your speed. And I went back there and there was like this like coffee machine for a nickel. They actually was a nickel, and so I was like, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And she's like, you fucking nerd. And so, we went out to Thai food and she was like hungover and I was stoned and we didn't talk and we just ate Thai food. And like,
sriracha.
We're both pretty awkward, but it worked out. We really took a shine to each other. And I started, like helping her with her homework or whatever. She was like going to go to Cal Poly for urban planning, but we just both blew everything off to fall madly in love and have a romance and then be mortgage brokers.
Okay, well, that's a huge gloss over. So, I mean, we don't have to get into details of like where you made love or whatever.
So the whole crash, that whole domestic crash, I was part of that subprime thing.
2008 stuff.
All the movies were about and then I was caught in it too, and I wanted to buy a house for my mom and all. It was kind of the peak of my ego. Peak of my like apex. Like I thought I had the world by the ass. I thought I knew what was going on. And then they crashed on the whole world.
Yeah, I remember
that. My dad told me it was going to happen. I said, if they did that, do you know what would happen? It would plunge everybody into chaos. There'd be homeless people and they would never do that. And my dad was like, the fuck, they're not. They're about to do this. And I was like, no, they're not. And so just for the record, Dad, you were right. They did that shit. They did it. I was wrong. And so I did. And when that happened, I did my daughter, Alicia, was born. And a year later. And so I did an about face. We lived in a 1-bedroom studio, like a studio apartment. We walked to the hospital. And I was blessed with our first child. And
under conditions that were stressful, but yang to the front.
Yeah, no car, no money. I had a DUI at the time because I'd been out in Hollywood celebrating or something. And and I'm walking.
Those are expensive.
DUI. Yes. And it was very expensive to my pride, I think, more than anything else. And so here I was just, we were taking the bus together to go to work in the mall at like a baby clothing store. The whole story. We were super poor, like
Rags to riches.
The
Or something
whole,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Riches,
Like,
but
because,
you gotta hustle like that. I mean, I keep going. I don't mean to interrupt you. It's like this is
no,
what
no,
makes
it's just
this
you
makes
know,
character.
that's exactly, yeah. I was humbled because things had come easy to me. You know,
That's a wake up call when that happens. When privilege
Yeah.
kind of stuff. It's just like, I guess life is not all sugar canes.
no, I had a choice to make when my daughter was born, and I said, and put hockey handles on it. You can still find a picture of it on Yelp, and it was a rickshaw. And by this time, we'd moved to the Bay Area to be near my wife's family, and I went out to the city with a rickshaw. I went to the rickshaw stop, a famous place off Fell Street, the Mission District, in not off Mission in San Francisco, where a lot of bands play. And I set up my barbecue cart and just sold hot dogs. And I was just like,
Were
you know,
crushing it?
oh yeah, like, well, the way it started was I was a bartender first, and I was sitting there drunk after work. I'd made my $250, and I was spending it eating hot dogs. And I was looking at my compa, and I was like, this motherfucker is here. His entire being is considered illegal. The cart is definitely not permitted. The location is not permitted. Like, everything about this is not allowed. And yet,
Here it
in
is.
spite of all those odds, he's just here living his life, just selling fucking pedos calientes, you know? And I'm just like, if this man, like, and I'm over here and I'm counting it, I'm like, this person has huevos.
He broke
you
the
know?
system. He broke the
Yeah,
system.
and I was just like, this is revolutionary, you know? Like, and I was like, this is like everyday revolutionary stuff. So I was like, okay, fuck that. Quit my jobs, opened up some hot dog carts, and we did that for like a few years. I worked in front of nightclubs, so I could be there during the day with the kids, and I always had cash in my pocket. We had a good lifestyle.
That's ingenious, honestly. I mean, that's like American dream hustle kind of stuff, where it's like you got what you wanted. It doesn't mean you didn't have to sweat for it, but you got what you wanted.
Well, I had started learning magic and astrological magic specifically from my best friend, who is a somebody in that field, and he started teaching me stuff back in 2004 when people were first messing around with hoodoo, and long before desire magic and all that kind of stuff hit the books and hit the stuff. And I was because I was like pseudo Catholic from my mom and dad being raised Jesuit and Franciscan, I was like, there's demons in there, you know? And so
that
he
book's
was
off
like,
limits.
yeah, so I would only learn planetary magic because they seem stable, you know,
as opposed to what, like archonic like forces or something.
Yeah, or like non
Entities.
planetary identities. Like, what about stars?
Correct. This gets into stellar kind of Aleister Crowley stuff.
Yeah, what about stellar magic? What about the Benin fix? There's so much out there, right? And there's also cultural archetypes, right? Mestizo stuff. So
Whatever it would be.
you have like an owie
very
with that. Yeah, you start if you have a Saturn affliction, you might find that you have injuries to your foot or leg or ankle during that time period, you know, so you might be careful in that way, or you want to harmonize that. It's hard to harmonize with Saturn. He's kind of an asshole.
Saturn is Saturn. It's funny. It's almost like reading the script of the Matrix. If you could see the fucking code.
Yeah, well, my friend can see the code. So we call ourselves Coyote and Crow, and I'm like Coyote and he's Crow. I read the sort of to lure. I can tell you what's boots on the ground, like what's happening in a lot of places on Earth. I can feel it, I can see it, and I have friends there, and I know how to get around stuff. I was a trucker, you know. I had my own little trucking company for a while, hauling stuff across this nation. You get to see quite a lot.
Yeah.
You also get to learn how for anybody who wants to know, when it's 500-pound variance on that scale, because it's a 48,000-pound truck. So the cartels pay truckers to hide up to 500 pounds of drugs in all the trucks. So all of the drugs that go everywhere are all the fucking time, whether you know it as a driver or not. Unless you're in control of the supply chain, like Uline, or like somebody major who's in control of every little aspect, like Walmart, where they have that, like, you know, throughput. There's drugs on all the trucks.
The dark side of driving economies, I guess, or whatever. That's a good example. I mean, for everything, there's a to and a fro. It's like, oh, yay, business.
Well, that's
economy.
That's why I started distancing myself from politics, because I understand that any system that's created by a person is corruptible by a person, because there's a person operating it, and people are corruptible.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, yes.
So when I started seeing that, I was like, oh God, it's like trying to create a dam with spider silk. Like, what a waste of life. Oof. And so I started looking for what I call celestial remediation, which is like how to attune, how to tune in to different light frequencies, sound frequencies, vibes, whatever you want to call it, that take your life out of
Double
one thing.
Aquarius. I just want to point out, you're such a mad scientist. This is perfect. But it's also very practical, all that Virgo energy. You're like, I want to talk to star beings, but that means I have to do it on a Tuesday at 5 o'clock saying this word or whatever.
Yes, that's exactly right. Because I'm busy and I have other things to do, and you can't be having those star beings come and bother you when you're trying to have a podcast. It's very unhelpful.
Well, let us know if we get any drop-ins. So, I mean, we're all over the place, but I guess you were getting to the point of the hot dog kind of thing, and it's getting closer to where you are now. So you've got the entrepreneurial bug in your family. It seems like you guys know how to hustle, make it work, but also are kind of freedom fighters, if you want to put it like that. So you're a blend of all that out, karma, if you want to put it that way. We tend to be the branches of the tree that was before us, kind of, right? The seed and the tree kind of analogy. Not to say you're exactly their karma, but you see what I'm saying. Kind of, we're these like gravitational momentums of the things that happened before us. So it seems like you are moving more and more into like self-employment and stuff. When did your hot dog thing blow up so much that you were kind of just like, I'm the boss and I'm not on the street at the club? Because that's a great idea. I mean, you know how many drunk people like who will throw money around without realizing it, tip, and they're hungry.
Yeah.
They're fucking
munchies.
Yeah.
People gave me hundreds. People gave me 20s. People tried to buy my dog. They wanted to kiss
drugs.
my dog. My dog was like the main attraction. He'd come back with lipstick all over him because he was white. My daughter would be like, "Who's kissing my dog?" And because they want to marry my dog. He was the main attraction. But yeah, I've always been a boots on the ground kind of person. I like to take a survey of life. I did surveys. I did door to door. I did door to door for the Public Interest Research Group in the green belt around Boulder, or Clean Water Action in things. So I did all the little political stuff and save the trees. I did that with my young time when I was on my own.
And you found that to be ineffectual?
I felt it to be very satisfying because I got to actually see who these people were in the house, who's writing the check, who believes this, what is their belief manifest like, what are they really doing? Like, is this really a swinger couple inviting me in and I'm 18? I want to go there. Like many things happen, right? When you're canvassing, walking about. So I've always been somebody who's been into walkabout. I believe that like people, when they're young people, 13, 16, 19, need to go and walk about. They need to go out and see the world and experience it at all costs on the back of a freight train. They should be equipped, but they should go out and see the world and go and walk about. It's part of developing your personhood. So that's always been something that's central to what I've done.
It's what you're doing. You're having a walkabout.
Yeah, we're having it happen, and some of us stay in one place, and some of us walk about. And I like making a circuit. I'm older now, and so there's less adventure. There's still places I would love to see that I've never seen that I'm dreaming of seeing. But I'm very involved. I'd love to go to all of the pyramids in
Machu Picchu and
all of them. I have so much work to do there. I'm working on a book called Transcending Candyland, a frank look at psychedelics and entheogens in South Mesoamerican history. I've been working on it for 5 years.
You know you're coming back on to talk about that shit at some point, right?
We'll talk about that at another time. It just has to do with my commentary on how different cultures use psychedelics and we shouldn't project just one way of using them onto everybody. Whether that's therapeutic or any other way at all.
Right. All right, so I guess where I was going with that was like your entrepreneurial bug it was working, and at some point it was after the hot dog stuff. Like, when did you start kind of shifting gears to where you are now? I guess is what I'm getting.
Yeah. So,
and you could be as open or discreet as you choose.
I turned my back on like sales and making money because I realized that I had done some harm with the mortgage industry, although inadvertently and unintentionally as a young man. And I realized that a lot of people were taken advantage of and that their retirements were gone and all this stuff. And I didn't make any big money. I wasn't like Bernie Mac, 100,000, 200,000, nothing big. But I was just ashamed of that. And so I was struggling to meet the needs. My children are getting older, and they now needed me to be home every evening after they were done with school. And so now I was revisiting the trauma of my school experience, questioning, do these children need to go to this kind of institutional school, and how to change my life. So I've constantly changed my money making around the needs of my children and how they need my presence, and in what way they need me. You know,
You realize how healthy that is? Just I'm a bachelor man, but it's like from a man to a man, it's like no one talks like that. Everyone's like, I want to win.
Yeah. I'm just listening. I love those stories, and with this statement, I'm like, wow. I mean,
Yay!
find anyone who would say that, you know, because what is more important ultimately, you know? So props.
Priorities are rightly situated.
Very humbled because I'm blessed to be a custodian of these new spirits that are coming into the world, and it's the greatest blessing. You know, when you're younger, you think I have to accomplish stuff, I have to do stuff. This is your ego talking to you. You do have to do stuff, you do have to accomplish it, but you have to feel right with yourself. And it wasn't until I became a father that I felt right with myself, because I was able to feel, I don't know how to explain it, the value and the love, like the unconditional love for another person was so overwhelming that it made me realize all of the ways I was not expressing that in the rest of my life, and how that's a lie. How you have to be integrated, you have to be consistent, and it doesn't mean that you're perfect. You know,
No, I'm not
people have
suggesting
impulse
that.
control issues. People fuck up all the time. Like we are completely
Humans are humans.
I'm a hot mess. But being honest and bringing yourself back to that honest point is called holding yourself accountable, and that's where the work is. And you know, there's one of my teachers, Lu Ming, wrote an essay called "Being Human is Nothing Extraordinary," and it's like a 4-page essay, and I highly recommend it. He's passed away. Rest in peace, Lu Ming. But yeah, I just realized like I could have been quite a dickhead when I was younger, and I felt like having children and then psychedelics just like I woke
prioritized
up.
You.
Yeah, I woke up. And so I just turned my back on everything that was happening in about 10 years ago in the cities. I took a survey of, you know, the world. I've traveled enough. I've looked around, and I just said, resources are getting scarce. Climate is shifting. Whatever you believe about that, at a farmer level, we can tell you that the shit isn't growing the way it's supposed to, or the way that our, you know, that ancestral wisdom that's been passed down.
It's going on deaf ears now.
Yeah, it's like when you don't calibrate your zodiac or whatever, you know, to account for the precession of the equinoxes. Right now, suddenly, you know, shit isn't working right. Why? Well, it is working right on a 25,000 year, 100,000 year cycle, but you just have to know when you are. And that's why I think astrology is so important. On a meta and macro level, we have to recognize that astrology was meant to advise kings on how to govern a nation of food. They're agrarian. These are farming peoples. You know, you don't have a king of a hunter-gatherer tribe. There's no like egalitarian tribe of 100 to 500 people that are kind to each other and share everything to have a king. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
That's agrarian society. So once I saw that, I just said, I don't have the financial means to protect my children in a city. And even if I was a millionaire or a billionaire, I can't buy clean air in Bel Air.
Mm-hmm.
I can't buy clean water. I can't. And it's an illusion to think that anywhere is safe, right?
Correct.
That's an illusion, and you shouldn't chase that. But you have to decide what input you want, garbage in, garbage out. And that's what we were talking about earlier, is you're saying there's so much information out there. And what I didn't say is that that's because people are getting their information from the panopticon. If you're getting your information from nature, if you're spending the majority of your time in nature, your inputs are nature. And your body is designed to do that over millions of years. The software was designed to run on it. And we now know that sunlight, the pituitary gland, when we know all this stuff now, all the stuff that was like you were a weirdo or a hippie for believing in before about
there's evidentiality for it now.
Yeah, like you go to the Huberman lab and just read that guy. You know what I mean? Like he's just backing up hippies as far as the eye can see, wearing black and listening to Tool. Good for him. You know, I think that that's good work that needs to be done. But if you don't need proof, if you're somebody that wants to just get on, if you're not invested in proving your worldview to somebody else, if you're invested in
being,
then you don't have time for that. You just want to work with what you can work with, what works for you. And so what works for me, I realized I had a high level after years. I didn't realize these things because I substituted adrenaline and aggression. And was like, I'd get scared or have anxiety, and I'd be very aggressive. loud or physical. And I didn't realize that that was actually like a shadow behavior
Trauma
for
response.
yeah. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit, bro, you need some work. You are
It's humbling, realizing
you know,
how werewolfian we can be.
yeah, be a dad, do this, survive, keep Babylon away. Like, oh my God, like, what are you gonna do? So I had a crisis. I had a mental crisis, if you will, and I just went up to Oregon. My best friend, other best friend, Andrew Valdez, and my introducer to many levels of mushrooms and many, many wonderful things, came with his wife and son, picked me up and brought me to Oregon, put me on their couch for 3 months, and gave me a job in one of the first medical cannabis farms in the Rogue Valley. And I was a patient also briefly. And I got a job and brought my family, got a trailer, got my family and brought them to Oregon. And since then,
What year was that? Ish. I mean, vaguely. 2015 kind of thing?
15.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 15. I'd have to talk to my wife to be sure.
No,
But,
you don't. It's not, I'm not holding you
yeah.
to it. I think that's
But
about
yeah,
when I might have started talking to you.
that's when that happened. And that was like, I really had like the whole baptism in awakening and psychedelic consciousness, because although I had worked with them, not the way I was working with them at this point.
Intentions
When
had
I
shifted.
had, so there was just some bad shit that happened at that time in the family dynamics. We lost a home and things like that, and it was a betrayal, and it was more than I could bear at that time, and so I needed to reset, and I did. I reset. My friend sent me up to the Oregon Country Fair. I don't know if you know what that is.
I've heard of it. It's pretty much like a hippie's fucking cauldron of reality. I think you fill me in. You fill me in. I think it's basically like, hey, who wants drugs? Go there, kind of thing.
There's like 600 acres that was deeded of some like this amazing land along a river that is being protected, and the hippies have been throwing parties there forever. And it's like clothing optional. The people from like my survival background in Idaho from '94 were there with like arrowheads. There were people there dressing
almost
up.
like a Burning
Man,
and
it's
but
also,
like less commercial.
Yeah, but it's very kid friendly. It's very healthy, and like there's areas where like, clothing optional, like reggae dance over here, but like kids can be over here, or it can be like a Mardi Gras walkthrough. And the town of Eugene like uses the city buses to bus like 50,000 people in during the weekend. Then at night they close down and have their own campground parties. So I went there and I ate like, I think like a half ounce of mushrooms in a night.
Dry?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
So I was a sick person.
You needed a lot of medicine. Yeah.
I wanted to get better. And I wanted everything about the way that I was before to die. And I understood enough about what I was doing. I had a serape, you know, and I had a few things, a couple tools, medicine tools, and I just kept eating.
I wish there was footage of this, like a GoPro of that night, because I have a feeling it's
Oh,
different than you think.
Photograph. In fact, there's a Facebook guy painted my face up like Day of the Dead. And like I had a serape on and some white pants, and then I went to this place called the Herb Bar or whatever, and I just kept at Camp Zumwalt, and I just kept eating. I was like on an eighth and another one, and they were like, "You want more?" I was like, "Yes, brother." And I sat there, and I had time traveling kind of space. I walked in circles, like I can't even explain the things that had happened in that time. But
ineffable, I'm sure.
Yeah, truly. But I came back out of that.
It's your La Herrera, essentially. You did.
Yeah. I came back out of that like just completely wiped, you know, and just like tabula rasa, clean slate, and an opportunity to move forward, walking a new path with heart, but a path in spirit. So we did that. Moving to Oregon was very humbling. We were very poor. I had never gone to food banks before, and we were going to food banks operated by like every type of Christian you can imagine. And, you know, it's very humbling as a man with a family to accept food and to wait in line and to wait and not feel better or worse than the people that you're next to. Even going to a food bank and feeling sorry for yourself for having to do that is a form of like ego and privilege and stuff. And like, you have to just go and just accept who you are and be where you're at and be grateful. And so that was like a whole gratitude practice that I went through, you know, of receiving service. having contributed to the system in many ways throughout my life, to finally be on the receiving end was very humbling. And I was extraordinarily grateful, which is such a beautiful feeling.
It is.
I'll tell you the magical story. Okay.
Yeah.
I bought a trailer because I had to go get my family from San Francisco, and I brought them back up in a truck. And I didn't know how to drive a truck and trailer at that time. I didn't even have trailer brakes. And I'm bringing my whole family loaded down. And the majority of the trailer is filled with San Pedro cactus and my kids' bunk beds. Okay.
All right.
So I'd already
I love
had
how
my
you like came up closer to tell me. It's like, I'm listening.
yeah,
Like, bro,
San Pedro cactus.
trailer.
Right?
It was a
So I'm
trailer.
driving up this thing. We get up there, and we're homeless. We're in a Walmart parking lot for like a couple of weeks while I worked at this brokerage next door. And I would leave in my lunch break. The kids would go to McDonald's to use Wi-Fi for K through 12, and we were doing homeschool. And this was hard because we had to live through this time where this is like a choice we made. And one night I was laying in the police came and moved us. This is like a precursor to what I guess a lot of the homeless Americans experience now. And we were moved from the Lowe's parking lot to the Walmart, because you can't park in Lowe's, you got to park in Walmart.
Classism even in that parking lot.
Police were like, you got to go. I'm like, all right, dude. So I moved. And that night I was just crying, and I was like begging, but I prayed and I said, please help. Please help. If there's something, and there's one trick I learned about prayer is that you don't pray with your mind, because your mind will create duality. You can think good and bad at the same time. You pray with your heart, which does not have duality. You pray with emotion. And if it's a proper emotion, and usually the universe will answer your prayers.
It wants to respond to expansion and kindness and all that stuff. Yeah.
So I did that. And the next day I got a call back. There's a housing shortage this time. Not a lot of places to move in. We had money. We couldn't move in. So we're just stuck in this trailer in Walmart. And this lady calls me, and I come to look at her place, and I'm staring at her. And I said, did you ever work in Los Angeles in like the year 2000? This is like 16 years ago, mind you, right? And
Big
she's
reach.
like, I did. And I was like off of Magnolia Boulevard in North Hollywood. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, she's like, at Continental Warranty? I was like, holy fuck. And so the woman who rented us a home out of a Walmart parking lot, whose own child was in the same K through 12 online program, said, I moved up here 6 months ago. My water pipes burst in the winter. CPS tried to take my children away because I was in the same situation you were in. And they could come try to take your kids away. And it turned out we had worked together 16 years ago. And we had been nice to each other, but we didn't really know each other. She rented me the house right next to hers the day before Thanksgiving and took our family out to eat at Denny's for Thanksgiving. I hate Denny's, but I have never been more happy to go to Denny's in my life.
I hear you.
And more grateful. And
you don't kick a gift horse in the mouth, as they say. It's like, wow, this is great.
Well, I was in tears.
Yeah.
Because the universe, like I had called everybody. I had called everybody 3 times. I had put in ads trying to get my family housed. And while working, couldn't get in, just a housing shortage. And this is the person that calls me the next day after I put in the prayer.
That's cool.
Like that. When you start making moves and living your life exactly that way, and then everything starts coming as it's needed that way, that's what reinforces your strength and conviction in that that this magical or weird path you're walking is legit. Yep. That there are invisible lines that transcend material roads, and you can get places non-linearly very easily if you open yourself to them.
You've just triggered in my brain. First of all, Raphael, if you have anything to say, feel free. There's a Talking Heads song called "The Good Thing," which is from one of their earlier kind of albums. But it's I don't have to talk about it, the whole thing. But basically, it's like a straight line exists between me and the good things. I have found the line. Its direction is known to me. Absolute trust keeps me going in the right direction. Any intrusion is met with the heart full of the good thing. As the heart finds the good thing, the feeling is multiplied, and the will to this add the will to the strength, and it equals conviction. As we economize, efficiency is multiplied. To the extent I am determined, the result is the good thing. It's what you just said reminded me. That's why I was like, I got to look up these lyrics real quick. They're a mushroom kind of band, I think. Actually, now that I think about it, I think they used to do mushrooms and jam. But it's fascinating always when it's like we're in a dance. We're in dance. We're like little swirling dervishes of cosmology, and it does not mean we will not get our toes stepped on. Like we put valuation on certain styles. This is all metaphorical. Like, oh, if you were dancing well in life, you're going to be fiscally always up. You know, like we have certain programs with capitalism
Yes.
or any of these things where it's like success or acceptance. We reach and we reach and we reach, and then I guess what I'm getting at is when we're usually at our like rope's end, it's almost like It's a Wonderful Life, right? Where it's just like, holy shit, I've got a, I'm presuming you've seen It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, I love that movie.
That's what you're sounding like. It's like you were at the rope's edge and there was no way to pay the bank back. And then the community essentially kicks in. And it's like, it's the good thing. And I mean, in a sense, in that film, he had to get reconvinced by seeing almost like, let's be real, it's a psychedelic trip without drugs. I mean, basically,
life is a psychedelic trip without fucking drugs if you're paying attention. You know what I mean? I think the psychedelics are a lot of times are for people that are not listening. Some people
megaphone.
Some people are like, they're already there.
Yeah.
Like they're already dialed. With my kids, my job is not to get in their way as much as possible. Prevent certain behaviors, to get out of their way, and let them let me occlude their behaviors, because a lot of our problems is passed down trauma. That's a fact. So the best thing we can do,
the father kind of thing. Yeah.
And isn't that terrible? Isn't it terrible how much like ancient wisdom is getting validated? That's so terrible. I really wish that wasn't true.
Hold
on 1 second. I have.
Yeah, do your thing. Raphael, I'm kind of curious. I mean, Jesus Christ, what a story so far. This is why I love asking people what their lives are like, because we never understand how people go from point A to point B, and everybody, like he said, is going through the trip and having a blast and doing it animistically, as he would say. But it seems that, I don't know, it's always fun for me to hear the X-Men origin stories, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yes, and also just like you said, how to move in a way that is not linear. I think that's the most, important thing to remember when things seem stuck or difficult or anything like that it's not really a linear process. And if you're open to that or you're attuned to that, I'd love to ask you more about that. Yeah, well, we're going to ask what it means to him. You asked me often enough.
All right, so we were just talking about linearity. I mean, the whole point of It's a Wonderful Life is like, look, you're on this kind of Saturnian trip, and oh my gosh, Buffalo Bill, won't you come out tonight? You fucked up. Oh my God, everything's going bad. It's stuck in time. I mean, it's very temporal and linear. Raphael might be able to pose the question better, but it seems psychedelics and the epiphany is a trans-temporal moment. That allows you to bleed through timelines or something like that, and then rectify the overall algorithm of your being or something like that. Anyway, Raphael, what was your...
Well, seeing it from that perspective makes it look really cool and, 4D overmind fancy. But yeah, I'm sure many people listening would be interested in that, or just even for experience sharing, because what you mentioned, that it's not a linear process, right? When you are attuned, and everyone maybe has their own process and operating system how to get their best, but then you can move in ways which seem impossible, but which just happen. And that's maybe also in a way a big maybe hope for anyone who for any reason feels depressed or stuck or anything, that oftentimes, at least for me, when I was conscious enough to realize it, it was just the tiniest things that I at least believe, I rearranged within myself or something, and suddenly, the whole wall gives away in a sense. Yeah. And then sometimes you catch yourself in those moments and you're like, what did I even do? And you're like, maybe I just did the tiniest thing of, loving yourself more, accepting yourself or something like that.
Attitude shift, belief shift.
And suddenly, and you're like, oh, great, and all the time until you do that, it's just the time you choose to torture yourself. At least that's how I
it's the meme with the boot on the head. And you're like, oh my God, everything sucks. Then it's a watch. There's nobody in the boot. It's just kind of playing around. Anyway, so I guess Raphael's question, I can't ask it for him. Like, what is your understanding, I guess, of linearity or relationship to linearity, magical kind of thinking?
Well, I would say that, like, I tried to read Brian Greed's String Theory, and I tried to read all those
cosmological
books, and I did my best reading them.
There's no wrong answer.
My best understanding. I guess my best understanding. Gurdjieff was a huge influence in me. Gurdjieff, and also I would have to say, like, how that harmonic resonance, like the way when you string guitars and you hit, if you ever play an instrument, that's probably as close to how reality is organized. You know, that like the sound wave that comes from striking all a chord, you know. First there was the word, right? Our consciousness is an order of words. So I would say that we make sense out of reality that way because of the way our brain works. We have a limbic center, which is at the very bottom for reptile stuff, and we have the mesolimbic, and then we have the parts above it, the neocortex, temporal. But in the very center of it, yeah, and your hippocampus is responsible for encoding sense memories and positive memories and experiences. It's basically what programs your DNA for future. And then you have your amygdala, which is your fear flight response. And between these two, you construct the future and the past. If you go in there and you damage these parts of the brain that affect memory centers, all of that disappears.
You're in the white zone.
Linearity, all that is a time is a construct.
Mental construct. Yeah.
It's a mental tool that we have created, result of our neuroanatomy, that makes sense out of the world for us to operate the way we've evolved to operate. Now, if you're asking at the center of that, was that purpose? Was that intelligent design? Is there a God? Is there a sky daddy?
God knows. Who the fuck
I hope
knows?
not.
Yeah.
I don't really like sky daddies. I hope none of those are the fucking truth. Those
You don't
guys
like
seem
cops. You
really
definitely
weird.
don't like sky daddies.
I'm not a big fan of Sky Daddy. So
Yeah.
I like Mother Earth much more, even though she works with him. But the thing is like, you know, I'm a child of the earth. So Sky Daddy can't find me in a cave. That's, you know, there's a lot of ways. There's a lot of like,
Going to Agartha. Fuck all y'all.
yeah, there's a lot of low-tech ways to beat high magic too. High magic people get into all this mental influence stuff. And it's like, well, that's why sometimes shamans just run over to the other village and chop that dude up.
Oh
They just
God.
hire,
So
they're like,
private.
why did you go chop him with a machete? Like, he was sending poison darts at me. Didn't you see it? And they're like, bro, you're nuts. And it's like,
Maybe.
was he? Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, you know. So linearity, I think, is a function of our mind. I think Alan Watts covered that really well when he starts talking about, you know, and neuroanatomy backs that up. I don't think that that's how the majority of life in existence experiences reality. And I think
No, the
that
fruit fly is not grokking the periodic table or whatever.
So maybe
yeah,
what
I think
I
we
wanted
need to
get at.
crowdsource experience more and not just rely on what our view is. We need to acknowledge that, you know, dolphins and elephants and bugs,
The
and, you know,
wisdom of
all of
other
these things,
domains.
yeah, they're totally tapping. Their reality isn't real. It's just not ours. So there seems to be that there's many overlap realities that touch, and at those touch points is where we all get to hang out.
Yeah. Raphael, what were you gonna say?
No, so maybe my question in the sense is because the one way it usually works out, this thing of like life arranging itself, is usually in stressful situations or when it is like really required. Like you said, you're asking for help, then things happen. But there's of course also maybe a natural attunement to that, or how would you say you experience it day to day? Because in a way, you know, you could sleep through whatever you want to say. You could do these portal jumps every day. In another sense, maybe it's not necessary. Maybe that's not what the experience is about. You know, you want to have, let's say, you know, a quiet week with your family or something. It's maybe not about hitting these portals all the time. But yeah, I was just curious about, you know, how you experience that, or if that's something you consciously attune yourself to, or you just realized it is there when required, which is what I certainly realized. Yeah.
There's a guy, another one of my teachers, a Taoist, who said to me one time, I was very excited about telling him where I was able to glean information from. And he was like, there's data in everything. Tea leaves, clouds, chicken entrails, you know.
Farts.
So what I do is I tune into the weather that I think is important. And I kind of like, I default to nature. So I think nature's a good metronome, a good barometer, a good baseline. You know, I don't have enough higher knowledge to think that I can come up with a system that people should live according to.
That should
Better
trump
than the one
nature.
that's already there. So what I look at life is like the Big Dipper. We all now know that that's actually a map of the sky. The swastika is actually
Correct.
just a map of the Big Dipper moving around, you know, the northern hemisphere.
The seasons. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fucking important. That tells you when and where you are in the universe. Exactly. Like I'm in winter over here, you know, and that's really important for living in context with the earth. So I'm really somebody who lives Taoist ways, where I'm very seasonal. I understand what season I'm in. I understand where I'm at on the earth and what the animals are doing. I understand that eclipses can be transformative, but are generally chaotic and dangerous, and that all the animals wake up, you know, and all these things happen, and that maybe holding down some order and doing some mantras during that time might be helpful. So I do navigate through an assumed timeline, and I kind of say, okay, well, I'm living at the end of the Holocene, you know, if the Holocene even exists. I'm also, you know, in Kali Yuga, right? And this is the end times, but I still got to live, and my kids still want to eat stuff in the morning. But it's Mercury retrograde, so I'm not going to take my normal way to school. That's one of my hacks. Every time Mercury is doing something, everything that it affects, I do differently. Because you lay down psychic tracks on the planet, doing shit the same way every time. And when karma wants to hit you with something, they're just going to come and fucking hit you where you've been. So one of the best things to do is, if you travel a lot, just stop doing it. You know, sleep through bad sleep. That was when my astrologer buddy told me. He said, when you see like a bad transit, just go to bed, just sleep. If you can sleep for 24 hours, do it. Just stay in bed. It's better. So I kind of weave astrological information, actual weather information, and sort of a little bit of I sprinkle it with geopolitics. Like, I'm not going on vacation in, you know, Ukraine right now. But like, other than that, no, you know, I don't. There's so many wars to be a revolutionary in. There's so many things to do that are meaningful and have cause. And I picked one as becoming a farmer, because I felt that being a salesperson, I read Khalil Gibran, the prophet, and he talks about going to the market and having something to bring. And I always felt like an interlocutor or whatever, like somebody who just is like middling, usury, margining. I wanted to grow something and bring it to market and know what I made.
The pride of the value of your experience.
Yeah, and let them decide to offer what they want to offer me, or if I want to give it to them, right? Yeah. So 9 years ago, I made an about face, and I went into agriculture and pounded T-posts and weed farms, and, you know, worked my way up from the bottom and let go of all of that because I wanted to become a farmer. So sort of the revolution I chose to be a part of was one in food security. Hopefully I have a contribution to global food security at some point in time, but that is a goal that could start with my immediate family, work out to helping the food banks and communities that help me, and expand outwards into the world. And then I realized that even more than food, people need food for the spirit. And that's where you can, like, I can only do
most hungry,
8 people a day. But if I can give 8 million people mushrooms, then they'll all go get acupuncture. They'll be like, maybe I should stop taking these heart pills, and I should, you know, fast.
Yeah. It's a big undertaking to be, it's not culpable, I guess, karmically. I don't even know how you approach it, but it's like, to be the prophet in the wilderness, so to speak, is going to incur some, how do I even put it? Showing people like an alchemical initiation is, I wouldn't even say it's like right or wrong. Not like you kind of like bad trips or whatever, or what you needed at the time kind of thing in my mind. It's like, yeah, you're just processing emotions or whatever you haven't confronted. How do you, I'll get to this in a second because it's going to lead there. Are you like Wendell Berry about it? Like, are you like, you're like, I'm going to go be a farmer and save the world through like local acts? And when you say farmer, is that more than one crop, or like what are you up to? Like, are you growing pumpkins, or like what the fuck are you doing?
Well, again, it comes back to another book like Ishmael, The Leavers and the Takers, right there, which is the story of people who are what you call hunter-gatherers and live in small egalitarian societies, which, you know, a lot of like libertarian douchebags want to like go back to some idealized version of. And then there's the farming cultures, and I'm myopic. I need contacts. I can't see. I would not be a hunter and gatherer. I'd be an arrowhead maker. I'd be by the fire, you know, a farmer. I find that the plants speak to me and I can speak to them. They don't annoy me. And so for me, a farmer is just anybody who's working with the earth and pulling a crop out of it. I personally grow a lot of strawberries because my daughters love strawberries. So I've taken it to heart to become pretty good at that. But as far as like a commercial crop that I have to offer people, it's psychedelic mushrooms.
That's what's up. I just didn't know if you were like, I do, broccoli and potatoes and like the
Yeah,
whole
no, I can grow
thing.
like watermelons. I've grown plenty of food, but the mechanization of monocropping, the just sort of the whole capitalist structure of getting distribution and food. I mean, we can break down the food that another time. Is to you have to wait for more of that system to disintegrate and
It's
be
happening.
ready with hyper local answers to
Yeah.
like during the pandemic, a lot of people couldn't get the food they needed in Los Angeles. And I was literally like, do you want me to bring you dino nuggets from
Bro, I
Oregon?
was in North Hollywood during COVID. I was in Australia and for basically like November, December, January, about February, whatever, Valentine's Day, I was on a flight from Gold Coast back to LA. And obviously they're like, have you been to China? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I have no clue. I was like, no, I have not been to China. I get to LA within like a week. I get stuck in West Hollywood. I think it was actually, maybe it was North. I forget. It was far away over in the mountains near like where Frank Zappa used to do shit. Laurel Canyon, I guess. Yeah, North. Okay. Yeah. And dude, there was a vibe there. It was Tool. It was so Tool. I was just like going to the store. I'm vegan. And I'm like, I don't even want much. Like, the toilet paper thing is a crazy thing, but I can figure it out. Like, whatever. I'll use newspaper if I have to, whatever. But to go in and have like shelves just cleared, like, and like people are like, I guess I'll eat like Hershey's Kisses for a week or whatever the fuck they were going to do. It was, and it was real. It was practically evident that we have set ourselves up for failure just because of lack of awareness and overrunning. I mean, you were talking about
Terrible.
It's where we're at, and we have to alchemize it. I mean, we can't overly go, oh my God, woe is us. Personally, I'm like, if we look at the Dragon Tail,
the abundance that we experience is at the expense of the rest of the world, and also with our communities. We've turned a desert out of Central Coast California. It wasn't like that before. There had been people existing there for 15,000 years, eating acorn, deer, and berries with no problem, because you're not exceeding the carrying capacity. The entire concept of an emergent city that dams up its water sources and all agrees to shit into a ocean that you don't have a sewage system capable of filtering pharmaceuticals is insane. Not to
it's a
mention
modernistic solution for sure.
And it just can't. It's not sustainable. It needs to go. And people are already much better minds than me are working on those things. What I'm working on is something very small. Kent State put out a thing on container growing, right? And I visited Freight Farms, Farm Box. Freight Farms is what's his name's brother, Musk's brother's farm, and the Crypto Bros container farm stuff. And that's needed because during shifting hardiness zones, where like the zones of agriculture are changing, like as climate
because
changes,
of the environment.
Yeah, like almonds don't grow here anymore. They now grow here. Like you can't, when you see people immigrating, the people are no different than the giant squids in the ocean. Everything is moving because everything is hot and changing, cold, and so everything's moving. That's what's Uranus, right? Like everything's happening, right? So we need something that is climate capable and mobile, right? And decentralized. The idea of centralization is just a nightmare. So I'm so happy that we're in the Aquarius times, because decentralization is where it's going to be
It's
at.
in vogue.
Like all these people are afraid, like the World Economic Forum's going to take over, 5G is going to control my mind. It's like, go for a walk in the woods. There is no 5G. There isn't 4G. I mean, if you knew that I had to have Starlink to have this conversation right now, like, oh my goodness. You know what I mean? Like there is so much of America that has no service, that has there's no one controlling you. You just go out there,
That's an immediate fix, but then it gets into like policies where it's like, they will keep making the 5G go. We've got to start actually changing.
So you do what the military does, and you go buy a copper net and you throw it over your domicile, or you integrate the copper mesh into your walls. This is what the military does. It's low tech.
Faraday cage kind of thing.
They've been using it since Egypt's like, hello, this stuff is not hard. You can just, if you're really that concerned, wrap your head in some copper and call it a day. Wear some copper underwear. I don't know. People get really caught up in that stuff, and it's like people just don't care about you enough to do that. They're finding large ways of wiping out most of you and allowing climate change to do it because they don't even want to spend the money on the bullets.
I hear you. It's cost effective. Just essentially be like, you guys want McDonald's? Here are free fries.
Famine, war, like disease, like it's
it's encouraging to hear that you're not paranoid. I mean, a lot of the people. No. It's funny. Libertarian kind of like
Wingnuts.
feudalism is in vogue or something like that. And a lot of my friends are like, how can we start communities, whatever. I get that. And the impulse is to kind of do that, but it's like, then it turns into like Lord of the Flies kind of colonialization, essentially. It's like, it's not much better.
Which is why they did democracy in the first place, because you get into these weird, like, tribal chieftain wingnut status things, like, and the
David
apex
Koresh
of that
or
is,
whatever.
is Kim Jong-un. That's the apex of a cult leader that made it to the top. He's like a Genghis Khan. He's kind of a bad dude. We don't want
because
that.
there are real dynamics, hierarchical, like Jordan Peterson would allude to. There's real hierarchy dynamics, and it tends to go, unfortunately, for a while. Evolution tends to survival of the fittest based off certain standard models, like the biggest gorilla gets the most harems or whatever. It's funny because a lot of what we've talked about has been I'm not against it. I would not call myself a material reductionist, but you're so practical, and I look at your chart and I see why. It's like Aquarius heavy, Virgo heavy. You're like, let's talk to aliens, but let's, like you said, let's make food until they, I'll offer them food, but otherwise, fuck off.
I totally believe there are interdimensional intelligences that are manifesting in people's experiences.
Mercury and Pisces, of course you do.
Yeah, that's definitely happening for sure. But the military is also doing its thing and pretending to be aliens. Both of those are happening. So I find that the truth is very inclusive. I don't think the truth is this or that. I think like all the shit's happening generally all the time. Everybody's trying to influence somebody. And most people are not very effectual because everyone fucking dies. And you don't get very much time at this. You get about 30, 40 years of good work. And, maybe you make a stone block with your face on it.
Yeah.
Like you got Ramses.
There's not a whole lot of evidence in the.
Yeah, it's like, how many people have lived and how many people have made come on now,
lasting impressions, as they say.
Yeah.
And it's we're talking about linearity. It's like the further one gets from something. I mean, that's why the pyramids are stone. It's like that's something that will hold over time. Blah blah blah. Most things just won't. One big solar flare, and a lot of these conversations in crypto won't matter so much or whatever. So all right. So we've gotten basically to where you are now. You're doing things for your family, and you want to be broadening, essentially, to some degree, your capacity for helping the world at large. Think locally, act globally, kind of thing. Eventually, hopefully, in your own estimation. Cause I've seen pictures on Facebook and stuff, and I've been like, because I've never tried growing mushrooms. I grew weed for a long time indoors in Colorado, and just walk me through the whole idea. Like you're taking boxes and it's just self-sufficient. Like what's the magic behind this? Because I've never tried it, so it's just totally Greek to me.
Yeah, like of growing mushrooms.
Not more specifically your angle on it and what your hope for
your
market is and stuff. But
yeah,
mycelia, whatever.
What happened was I became a production manager of up to 80 people harvesting up to 100 acres and 110,000 cannabis plants at the height of my.
That is a lot.
Cannabis career, yeah. And I posted the pictures of everything I do so people can understand that the scale, I'm not exaggerating. We're using combines to get it down, right? And I saw that it was crashing, the market was crashing, and I said, I need to go sideways out of this. I was actually, some law enforcement came and spoke to me and told me about what was going to happen and that I should probably stop doing those things.
Hey, they were good cops, I guess.
Yeah. No, they were trying to suborn me to help them.
Okay, so threatening tactic.
Yeah.
Like
well, no, they weren't threatening. They didn't threaten me. They're very polite. And then I said, "Does this require informed consent?" And they were like, "Yes." And I was like, "Okay, well, thank you for your time. I'm leaving." And that was the last we ever spoke. There was a time when they came through this county, which our county had more acres of cannabis planted than anywhere else on earth. So really, truly, the heart and soul of the cannabis revolution is here in the Rogue Valley, because they've been bootlegging for years, since the 60s. So really, I'm just a part of a larger thing that's been going on, and I want to give respect and acknowledgement not only to ancestors, but also to all the people that came before in this movement. And the person who impacted my mushroom journey spiritually the most is Baba Kalindi Iyi, who's passed away. And I met him through the martial arts community, and he's the one protocol I followed when taking increasingly high doses of psilocybin. And he got people up to 40 grams. So I stopped around 20 grams. I can tell you that if you take that whatever you've taken at 2 grams is nothing like 7. And whatever you've taken at 7 is nothing
it's exponentially different. Yeah.
It's not even the same. The closest I can say is that if you took DMT and you had a DMT experience, but then that DMT experience rode you for like 8 hours, 9 hours, that's the best I could explain it. So I followed his macro dose protocols first to recalibrate myself in the dark, if you will. But what I decided when I got into growing, I was just learning, and I invested and I gave money to people I knew that were growing, and I helped them do it. And they were growing in little plastic shoe boxes. And I was like, this is weird, but okay. So I learned, and I was like, this sucks. So I was like, let's get bigger shoe boxes. I got bigger shoe boxes. I was like, this is also weird. And this also sucks. I'm making my plastics. I'm drilling holes. I'm milking. This seems really anathema to what we're doing. But mushroom growing culture has come up in a closet because it's super illegal. They're super secretive. You got to kind of be a weird mad scientist to do it, especially when it's legal and it doesn't bring you a lot of money.
People have to want to do it.
Yeah, it doesn't. And that's the funny thing is the Simon Jesters, all the cannabis guys getting it, trying to make a lot of money. They're just all losing money because it's not that kind of thing. You're not going to do it every day. It's not cocaine. It's not candy. It's not sugar. You're not going to just capitalize on this stuff. So I don't mind people spending money on it, but it's just not going to be what they think it is. But anyways, I shifted over.
Keep going.
Yeah, into mushrooms, and what I saw was a bunch of shit that didn't make sense from my production point of view. And I realized that what you have is an insular mushroom Reddit community that's grown up in their mom's basement, and then you have like the industrial agriculture monster Monterey mushroom, China mushroom thing going on over here that uses lasers and shit, right? And this requires the entire factory, right? And in between, you have this gourmet, and all that. Yeah, you have this gourmet section in America where they're all using these plastic bags that come from polypropylene from China. And I just fucking hate plastic as much as plastic. And so I watched Paul Stamets talk 7 mushrooms can change the world, and I honestly was just completely taken in by that. And I wanted to be a part of that because I felt that that was meaningful. And when I found out mushrooms could eat plastics, I was like, yes, this is awesome. And then when I found out people were growing oyster mushrooms, which can eat plastics in plastics, I was just like, just kill yourself now. Just what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like this can't be the way. It is the way right now for a lot of people. I'm arguing with some of my peers about it. But what I eventually did is I developed a technique of scaling cubensis grows. And what most people don't know is the magic mushrooms, you get the cubes, everyone calls them. They're basically an agaricus. And agaricus is your white button mushroom, which is the most common mushroom on earth. It's a coprophilic mushroom, which means it grows in the dirt and poop. It doesn't grow on wood. It's not a wood lover, right? So there's only a handful of these like coprophilic mushrooms on earth. And the white button mushroom is the most commonly produced one. And it's produced in long aluminum shelvings that are open trays in giant open environments like dirt, like shelving of dirt. It's very efficient. It's reusable. And you don't have to go into all that plastic box stuff. You do have to have the space, the real estate, and the resources to have some kind of large operation. Yeah. So because I dreamed in a larger way, it brought me in contact with clients that had the resources to make that possible. And although I felt divided about helping people that are supposedly the enemy tank the market or whatever, at the end of the day, we are just making more medicine and getting it out there to people, and more people are eating it. And if that is your goal, is to inoculate the world, then that's your goal. And my goal is that, everybody who's of a consenting age should have the opportunity to choose taking communion with this other intelligence. It's an intelligence. That's another thing. I hate talking about mushrooms in the English language as an inanimate object. It is not. It is alive. It is a living culture. It has an intelligence. It literally mapped out the Japanese subway system better than we could.
I've seen that shit. It's crazy.
And when you take this stuff, man, you are creating a symbiotic relationship in your mind. And that is just, there's nothing else like it.
Well, I think Terrence McKenna said something to the effect of like humans are the way that plants spread their seeds, kind of thing. It's like the way evolution works is like we're just a problem solved, like it's a mechanism of problem solving through the Tao or however you want to put it. And mycelia, like if you guys, if people listening haven't watched it, and I don't love Netflix, but on Netflix I think is there's 2 good things. My Octopus Teacher, which is totally irrelevant but still good. Check it out if you haven't. It's like, oh my god, octopuses are fucking aliens. Not really, but they're just highly separate things, and it's like they're smart. They just do stuff. My Octopus Teacher, check that out. It's like an 1.5-hour documentary on Netflix. But fantastic fungi. I've shown that to my parents. I've shown a few people. I mean, it's a very entry-level, soluble kind of way to get people, whether it's his stuttering kind of thing, and then that heals that to kind of his awareness of the ecology of reality, the kind of Gaian spirit, if you want to put it that way. So when you're talking about, and I'm looking at the time, I'm sure you have kids in the life stuff, so
No,
we'll try
I'm
to write
fine.
it down. All right, word, because I want to. It's like, well, I won't make it like 5 more hours, but it's like, all right, we're getting into some juicy stuffs. And first of all, props on being an entrepreneur and being part of the change. I mean, that's really the big deal. Be the change you want to see in the world, and you are doing that. So huzzah, and good on you. And more people need to have the confidence with that North Node in Aries right now for the next 2 years, basically. We need to be tapping into basically primal subconscious. This sounds crazy. It's like we have to act on what we believe, basically.
Yeah.
And that's going to come both ways. There's going to be people like the whole Israel-Palestine thing. People's beliefs are going to come to the forefront, and we're going to have to kind of grind through some.
When everybody acts on what they believe, you have a lot of action, which means you have a lot of karma.
Yes, but you're kind of counterbalancing it because the nukes, like the Manhattan Project and White Sands and all that, was essentially a yin and yang to like Albert Hoffman. I met his grandson actually in Switzerland when I lived there, and he'd never done acid. But Albert Hoffman, and that, I mean, I see what you're doing kind of as an antithesis to some of the stuff that we would not prefer, like the Michael Tate.
We are actively trying to destroy the system by giving people access to in their own indigenous and ancestral wisdom, which mushrooms belong to everybody on Earth. Everybody's indigenous to all over the earth, and mushrooms grow everywhere. Not all of the mushrooms, like there are psychedelic mushrooms in China in the Yunnan province that they're just discovering now, and I might be able to get a culture of it. But the interesting thing is that this is ubiquitous. It belongs to all of us. It's something we can all share, and it's not like, okay, this is peyote, you don't fucking touch that, right? This is mushrooms, and it belongs to everybody. And if you want to break down the structures in the world, you need to break down the structures in your own self first. You need to, and the Buddhists spent all this time in the mental absorption practices, turning the mirror around, chanting to break the mind, single pointed concentration. All these things are designed at breaking through that monkey mind. Eating mushrooms does that, whether you want to or not.
It's a shortcut, or whatever.
It does that because it turns off the part of the brain that's talking, the visual cortex, which sends the information back here. It goes back and forth and comes up with your ego. It turns that up. It causes cross-hemisphere dialogue. It causes neurogenesis in the hippocampus and in the neocortex, the only 2 places you can actually grow new neurons. And it's just like, and then there's other mushrooms like lion's mane that help the myelin sheathing that goes along the neurons. It's amazing.
We're designed we have
what we realize is that we are co-evolved with them. We are co-evolved with everything. You have an endocannabinoid system, and cannabis as a species was around about 27,000 years ago. So do you think that we've like co-evolved with this? Like, obviously.
There's some guy in the Swiss Alps, I think, I forget that his name is like Uri or whatever, but he's like 13. I think it's up in Italy more, the Alps. But basically they're like, oh, look, he's probably 12,000 years old or whatever. It's like old, kind of Neolithic stuffs. And he's got some cannabis on him and a tattoo and stuff. It's like, oh my God, like there's been people doing this stuff for a long time. I kind of am curious when you're talking about it being a consciousness. I've heard a lot of, I don't disagree. When I do acid or any DMT is a totally different thing because it's that one phosphorus chemical off of the psychedelic mushroom. So I feel like you come into, well, how would I even couch this? With DMT, I was like, I think my parts of my brain are talking to themselves, like in archetypal form, like whatever these Egyptian quote deities are. It's like my hippocampus talking to my prefrontal cortex or whatever. It felt like that in some kind of grandeur thing. In a sense, it doesn't matter what's true at that level. It's like these archetypes kind of hold on to space and whatever. With LSD, it's just clean. It doesn't feel like there's a consciousness at all a part of it, whereas mushrooms obviously can make you a little nauseous, but it feels more like you're getting into a Gaian mind. I mean, I don't really know what else to say about that. What are your theories or feelings about the nature, origins, the conditions of the space? Because you were saying you don't like talking about this in a discrete kind of consumeristic model. It's like, oh, here's a mushroom, I ate it, I ate it and oh my gosh. It's like, it's more like you're entering into a domain of like a noospheric domain of evolution or something weird, where it's always there.
I appreciate the ability to talk candidly about this because I think that we're existing in a time when people are writing new narratives and new ways of interacting with the mushroom. And so I believe that everyone should develop their own relationship with it and tell us what that experience looks like. However, the people who stay around 2 grams, 3 grams, 4 grams, and don't make it up to 20 to 40 grams, like Acacia Lewis and other people, should keep their comments contained to their experiences. And then we can crowdsource this. We now have PET scans that we've done all this stuff where we can see what's going on in the brain. We know what's happening. Like you said, you're able to even maybe identify deities, not just from iconography and physical stuff in the brain, but actually
function.
Yes. And so we have mechanisms of action, material function. All this stuff is coming to play now, creating the new theology, if you will.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm very leery of dogma. And when I first came out, I was like, everyone should do it this way, and we should have an exact order of operations. And that was out of my own need for creating some sort of order, so I would be less terrified. But that's honestly totally
true, by the way. Good on you. You're self-aware.
Yeah, it's totally irrelevant and unnecessary, but it's necessary because it was necessary for me. It's not necessary for me to project that onto everybody else. That's being a dictator. That's authoritarianism, and that's not good. And if you can come out of mushrooms still being an authoritarian, you are a complete A1 lizard psycho, And you just gotta get a hold of that, bro. Eat more of them or something,
Break it.
So I also recognize that they can cause psychoses in people that are susceptible. I also combat the idea that psychoses is even something diagnosable. Like the DSM-5 has exploded since I started studying abnormal psychology 20 years ago. So I don't even agree with that paradigm.
Culture's making us all insane. I mean, the whole I'm a trans wolf thing. It's okay, maybe. I grew
up, reading Terrence McKenna and listening to Terrence McKenna, and I want to say something that's meaningful and adds to that without just regurgitating what we've all heard Alan Watts and Terrence McKenna and all of our people say.
I want your perspective on it, though. That's why I have you here. It's look, it's not just writing on the wall. I want your spin on it.
So, I have a big trouble detaining. Okay, so mushrooms have their own intelligence. Does that make you sentient? Does that make you conscious? I don't think any human is in a position to make that distinction.
Because it's our domain of what we define it as a human consciousness kind of thing. We're projecting.
This is a linguistic, it's a semantics problem, right? A lot of philosophy is semantical mental masturbation, right? So finding a way to talk about stuff without getting burdened by the words. I think that there's no question that they're intelligent. There's no question they have their awareness and that they have their agenda. And I definitely feel like a spokesperson, but so does everyone who decides to start talking on their behalf, but you have to be saying, well, how much of this is just what I think, that my ideas that came to me while I was on mushrooms, right? That are for me, for my life. And how much of this is just really does the whole universe need to hear?
Right.
The discernment
versus universal truth or whatever.
Discernment is the metaphysical tool that most people are lacking.
Yes.
And they say, how do you know? I used to lack discernment and I didn't know. And I spent many years developing it. And now I have some.
That county fair might have had a role in that. I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit, So I think they're intelligent. I think everybody should experience them for themselves at whatever level they need them. I don't think everybody needs them. I don't think you should give them to children. I think that children.
You mean 10-year-olds? When you say kids, 15?
I don't think that that's appropriate unless you are part of a current indigenous
culture that does it that way.
A real shaman is a role that is emergent and relies upon service to a physical and real community that lives within that cosmology.
Yes.
You cannot go down and just hop into somebody else's cosmology that you don't isn't really yours and you don't really believe, and then just have that shaman work on you. It's not going to work. But if you're part of one of those communities and part of that is your 9-year-old is taking microdoses of mushrooms, I'm going to support that a lot more than children in France in 1897 drinking a cup of wine. You know what I mean? So
the effects
I think
are so much more positive ultimately anyway.
Yeah, so I think that we need to safeguard and be careful with children's minds the most. I think that we know that cognitive maturity happens at 25, and that sometime between 21 and 25 is when you're done. We can't take away people's freedom of choice. We can't say, oh, you got to be 30
Just
for you.
Inform them.
Yeah, but informed consent is, I think, the one pillar of Western thought and medicine that you don't find in Eastern thought and medicine. I think one of the reasons I call myself coyote is like coyote medicine tells you indirectly. I invite you to start a relationship with mushrooms, knowing full well you're going down a fucking rabbit hole.
1000%.
But I'm not going to explain all that shit to you because it's not. You will explain it to me when you get back.
Yeah.
And so a lot of like Taoism and Buddhism, they trick you into this shit. They're like, oh, do this and you'll have superpowers. You'll have cities. You'll be able to do all this amazing stuff. And by the time you've like held your arm up for 20 years and it's atrophied and you can fucking levitate or whatever, like does it even matter anymore?
Did it ever matter?
And you know that. So it's a joke.
Yeah.
So like most of these things, these tantric stuff, and all, it's not that it's not real or whatever. It's just that like it's absorption, it's self-absorption, and they're tools of mental absorption that keep people from doing harm. Most people don't realize that most of the yogas and the sanas and the postures and the tantric stuff, it's basically done to just occupy people so that they don't go out there and commit havoc
Partly,
with
yes.
their impulse control.
Well, in a weird
Yeah,
way,
it's impulse control practice for self-health. That's great. More people should do it.
it was law enforcement from the Eastern perspective, I guess. They're like, look,
Yeah.
we're going to program
So in the West,
ourselves.
we have
Go ahead.
bingo. And in the West, we have informed consent.
Mm.
So we really need to keep a hold of that idea that people need to be informed, educated, and they need to have consent and they need to decide what's going to happen with their mind. And no government authority has any ability to regulate that at all. All they have to really do is regulate that it's safe or that it's healthy. And they can't even put the burden of that to be so high that then people can't make it for themselves, because that's ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Well, you're
This
a
is
smart
something
monkey. I don't know. I mean, there's, if you put like, a lot of people, this gets tricky because I sound like a eugenicist or something, and I'm not at all. I'm very humanitarian. It takes all kinds. So there's people who are just going to eat candy corn all day and watch fucking The Price is Right, and that's what they want to do. Or it would be nice if they could reset, and one would hope that the universe allows. I mean, this gets into weird theological kind of philosophical stuff, like how much does how much prodigal sonning can you do? What is return? Like the abyss and the return and all this kind of stuff. I had a thought, but I totally spaced on it. Raphael, good timing.
Let me ask something different, maybe for while we're more or less slowly closing it. In terms of, so let's say, psychedelic revolution in a sense, or enlightenment, let's say, or evolution even, just, let's start small. I'll be completely for it. However, then I'm kind of wondering, what about all these supposedly Silicon Valley executives, Hollywood individuals, so on and so forth, Joe Rogan, I don't know else. You ever smoke DMT? And I'm wondering, but with many of those, I'm really wondering, did they really get any message? Because I'm not really sure. Because the idea would be, in my view, if we see this as a game of allegiance or something, which it doesn't have to be, it's also a dualistic view, but still we could say it kind of is, just like you said, with centralization and distribution, or we have nature and life affirming or more threatening, So if there would be an allegiance, it would be natural that anyone, I would say, who got the message from weed, mushrooms, or ayahuasca, they would go to the life affirming side, let's say. With many of those high profile individuals, I'm not exactly sure what they're doing. So just out of sheer curiosity, what do you think?
What do I think?
What's happening there?
Well, I think, first of all, that from a Buddhist perspective, we would say that our attachment to outcome is clouding our ability to allow people to just do what they have to do, right? We want them to take these drugs and be like us. They're not drugs. It's communion with a living being. And the outcome of that is not something we could or should or desire to control at all. On the second hand, what I would say is, I met Joe Rogan shooting pool in LA when I was younger. And he's way fucking different than he used to be. Does that mean he's who everybody should try to be like? Does that mean no, but enough people on earth have voted for him to be the new Oprah, I guess. Yeah. I don't watch any of those people, It's a great comparison. So, I don't,
in a way, it's an upgrade.
What I would say is that when you take a psychopath or somebody who has somebody who has psychopathy, narcissism, and sociopathy, and you fucking give them psychedelics, is that going to make them Gandhi? No. It's going to make them a better fucking psychopath. And that's part of my book premise on transcending Candyland. And this is a big, uncomfortable elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. And one of the contributions I hope to make to the community is okay, my ancestors, verifiably, some of them were participating in throwing children into cenotes, And now people like to go down to those places and throw raves in the cenotes and swim around with all the dead children. So which is it? You honor the ancestors, or
Party.
Yeah, what's going on? So maybe you're transforming, maybe you're bringing love and light, and you're liberating all those dead children in the cenote, and now they're having a rave with you. I'll buy that. Maybe that's cool if that's an intention. But how is it that you can have an entire civilization, build pyramids, do all this stuff, be connected? They can make a calendar that's 25,000 years old. They can have all this mathematical expertise, and then they can take at the founding of Tenochtitlan, they take a princess from another tribe and they flay her. And then they wear her skin for 3 days.
Holy
it's actually
shit.
the flayed man ritual. If you actually study the Aztec calendar and you actually look at the ritual days and the requisite sacrifices, of which I've done some, none which require other human sacrifice, they all involve bloodletting, making masa and corn cakes, putting blood into it, different things like that. So it's super fucking bloody religion. And you know what? There was a tribe of Nawa on the other side of the valley that were into that shit and also ate mushrooms.
Right.
So how do we have like some cultures using ruthless methods of authoritarian control and sacrifice and to modulate El Nino weather patterns and control population with mass hypnosis and psychedelics, right? And then you have other people who are becoming an empowered. So that's part of your question, my friend, is like, do I think that these CEOs are becoming nice? No, I think they're becoming like Quetzalcoatl or something, I think they're becoming like Genghis Khan. I think
but at least it would mean everyone's upping their game. I guess it's good.
Yeah, I don't think that Genghis Khan was a stupid man, and I think that people are forgetting the IQ. There's emotional quotient, which is what we've really riffed on a lot here, and there's the intelligent quotient. And the fact is that most of the serial killers, we think serial killers and psychopaths are dumb people. These are the people that are getting caught. These are the ones getting caught. The only intelligent one that we've caught is the ones whose neuroses have gone so out of control that they can't even help themselves with their intelligence anymore from being caught. They're like stuffing body parts here, and they're, and they catch them smoking cigarettes, and this like the prodigious amount of dead people around them, right? But the really intelligent psychopaths and sociopaths are the people that structure and order society. These people aren't getting caught. These people have, like, if you can have like a weird kink in your mind, do you think that person who like murders people through war indirectly doesn't like out of that? Of course they do. So like I used to be like, how come these medicines, first it was a medicine, right? Because it was fixing me. And it was a magical tool because ancient indigenous cultures use it that way. Then it was something I've co-evolved with. So my relationship with it has changed as my understanding and exploration of the mushroom as it has existed through human culture through all time has changed. And the only thing that we can say is that it changes. Majority of people are good-hearted, kind people that generally don't like to hurt others. There's a small percentage of our population that we now know but are they there to protect us from alligators? Did they do such a good job?
And even here, Melissa gave a great comment, and I completely agree. People with predatory gifts, that's a nice way to put it, just need to be channeled towards constructive paths. Yeah, instead of some other more psychopaths using them and then getting the whole population in trouble.
Like if you want to be a samurai, be a samurai.
They would probably the thing is, it would probably obviously, just like a hunter or anything we want to draw on, it has a function, and it just needs to be integrated into the system and supported in a way that it is supporting the whole system and not directed towards it. But just like with this whole inversion going on everywhere, obviously, of course, that's the let's say Ordian knot apparently we find ourselves in. But who knows, maybe Aquarius will soak it all up or something. And
well, that's the truth. Manly P. Hall. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Just seeing that there are patterns larger than myself and that our small lives, realizing that there are ancient sages that, took a fishing net and put it up to the sky and tracked the same things that we're looking at, and they projected what's going to happen in the future, this linear concept. It gives me a sense of security knowing that like, oh, we're existing in this time period. There's a happening, and then it's going to continue on. And this is my ticket here. And so many people are focused on the afterlife. So many focused are on the spiritual life, as if that is not
intrinsic.
Coffee is spiritual. Everything is spiritual, and that, and like I really feel that this is the golden ticket. you know, like not to be cheesy on Bob Marley, but like Preaching Man tells you that like life isn't here on earth. He doesn't know what life is worth. Like this is the golden ticket. The reason the aliens and different beings and star beings and all these different things are talking to you,
Slaughterhouse-Five style.
it's because you got the golden ticket. You're alive. This is the party. This is where it's happening, bro. They're like, "Ooh, higher consciousness. I'm an angel." Have you ever had to take this? Have you ever felt the relief of peeing? It's amazing. Right. Oh, God didn't pick you, did he? You know, angels are assholes. So that's just my opinion about non-core beings having a say on what, you know, we're doing. Is just like, get in line, get a ticket, bro.
Oh my God, so succinctly said.
That's a different type of getting in line, but yeah.
Dude, I knew you were Team Rabbit Hole from the get-go. Team Rabbit Hole me is kind of an ethos or whatever, which is like, look, the royal we going down the rabbit hole kind of thing. Like what you're saying, it's a happening, and we can kind of take notes on it and hopefully expand our own perspectives and have humility simultaneously. It's like, wow, look how little we do know, and let's laugh about it. Ashley, I think you're one of the more amusing and cool. I mean, this was fun. I had a blast. I hope you did too. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you want to address? We're going to get you back on for your book, so I'll probably pepper you with, you know, I won't harass you, you ghosting Aquarius. But
No.
What's up? What's up?
I see this as just like the nice nodal point of like, you know, we've been on a journey together tangentially. Like, you know, I may interact with 100 people, but you know, the number of people that I share, like I can spot like a lighthouse across, you know, the dark waters over there. And, you know, going through this last 7, 8, 9 years and knowing you indirectly, and then finally getting to me, it's a nice culmination of that.
What you see, what you get. I don't fake this shit. I
mean, and thank you very much for inviting me on.
Yes.
Yeah, I really appreciate getting to talk to you guys about being really weird. Please look past
really human.
My Southern Oregon camouflage. You know, wherever I go, I change my outfit so the locals don't just burn me at the stake. Find out.
I wanted to say it looks perfect. The way you're talking, I was like, this is so nice. It's like where you wouldn't expect it just from clothing style. Not that this would matter at all, but you know, that's a nice trick. But you know, knowing the trickster archetype and also camouflaging yourself appropriately can be very effective. So for many,
I was a big fan of Carlos Castaneda, and I understand that he took everything from a Buddhist library in Berkeley and all that. But at the same time, like he's a coyote teacher, he was telling you the truth with a lie. And I think that in these days of disinformation, it's very important. Like you have to decide, like if I'm playing a war, if we're at war and I'm on the cognitive liberty side, then I'm going to say things and do things that will lead people to that side. And that's you make war by way of deception, and every prince a thief. That's a quote from Viktor Ostrowski's book on the Mossad. So I'll just throw that out there.
That's heavy.
As a good book to read. But yeah, when you're in a war, you make war by way of deception.
Obfuscation.
And I have, by the way, I'm not actually referencing the conflict. I'm just referencing a really good book that's tiny.
No, I hear it. You're a literate man. You're a well-read man. It's more one of those things. I'm like, it's like I'll ask you questions. You can cliff note shit for me, and we'll geek out on it.
Bro, my friend does that for me. I'm half literate compared to my brother.
This is like, third-hand smoke.
Him. He's got published books. You know, I just like to learn. I like to read. The only thing I'd like to say is like the reason I'm coming out and talking about these things now is I'm no longer involved in anything overtly illegal anymore. I'm no longer, and mostly I was working in capacity with clients, helping them develop ecosystems that would allow them to meet really large supplies. So I got a unique experience to work every single mushroom tech that everybody wants to work. And at the end of it, it led me down the yellow brick road to the gourmet. And I'm sitting here looking at all my older brothers and my uncles and the grandfathers in this tradition. And I look back, you know, who is probably the biggest drug pusher that no one knows? Andrew Weil. Andrew Weil and Paul Stamets were homies. And Andrew Weil's the big bald guy with the giant beard, all the health books and stuff like that. You see him smiling next to these open trays of Cubenzis and stuff. I mean, these guys were responsible for the shift in consciousness. They're the reason that we are the way we are. Marina Sabina is the reason that we even got this medicine. It was a hidden ceremony. They hid it from the Spaniards for 500 years, and then they started dosing people in academia. If you think that was something that was like an accident,
That was a
and there
Trojan
wasn't some
horse.
intelligence behind that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to tell you, just eat some more mushrooms and get back to us. At the end of the day, we're just a continuation of what these people have put down, and I live in service to helping people. And we've started a company called ABC Fungi.
Word.
And we are doing legal gourmet mushrooms, and we're applying for a psychedelic license here in Oregon so that we can work directly with therapy centers. Although I don't agree with the laws that Oregon has put forth, we want to work within any system that we can work within, and then maybe subvert it. And then, that's how you create. That's one of the ways you can create change.
Correct. Sons of Liberty
so
style. I mean, you're not avoiding the conflict.
No, with sans violence and like,
not exactly.
In any RICO law stuff, no RICO law stuff either. None of that shit.
Okay,
but as far as like, just getting it out there to people, working with veterans is a big thing for us. My father is a veteran. It was recently Veterans Day. I think that during wars, people put a lot of emphasis on all the victims, which they should, but a lot of our soldiers are young men. They're boys that are not even cognitively aware.
Also victims, in a way.
They're brainwashed, and then they're put out there to die, and they come back broken.
Full Metal Jacket.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And if anyone needs help, like Melissa said, it's the warriors that need help. So keep a lookout for ABC Fungi in Southern Oregon in the next year to be looking to provide specifically adaptogenic things like lion's mane that will help with PTSD and cognitive stuff and psychedelics going forward. So
I'll have to talk to you because I'm taking this like adaptogenic kind of brew thing, coffee replacement matcha thing, and whatever. You probably have a bunch of friends or teachers or whatever that we could have fun with on this show. So I will probably hit you up at some point. But Ashley, you're a philosopher and a gentleman. I appreciate your time. I don't actually have a yogi tea. Usually I read a tea and I'm like, oh my God, the tea. But guys, further up and further in, as Reepicheep would say, I mean, this is how it works. The fractal is eternal and it just keeps going and going and going, Energizer Bunny style. And we are privileged to be witness to it and a part of it. So never forget that. It can get very overwhelming sometimes, but we're here. So we got to do it. Like, it is what it is. Ashley, once again, thanks again. Raphael, any thoughts?
Well, just thank you so much, Ashley. Fascinating stories. I think a lot to glean for everyone, and was also very fun to listen to you. So thanks a lot for joining us, and thanks everyone for listening in, and catch y'all next time.
Gang, gang.
Because have a blessed day. Take care.